Thank you everyone for coming. Welcome to the ANRS seminar series. If this is your first time here, it looks like we have quite a few people from outside of the Texas Tech community, so we're really excited you're here. Welcome. We do this periodically throughout the spring semester, so one of the silver linings of COVID is that we've been able to invite people that normally wouldn't be able to travel to us, and we've been able to set this up as a Zoom meeting. So we're really excited to have Craig Spencer here today. Just a couple quick reminders. Please make sure that you are muted while Craig is speaking. And we've got some feedback from a couple of people, so just double check that. And then also just as a warning, I think there's been some power concerns on Craig's side. So if we happen to lose Craig at some point, hold tight, we'll try to get him back. Worst case scenario, if just everything absolutely fails and we lose him entirely, what we'll do is we'll record his talk and post it online for people to be able to view later. The way that this series usually works is the speaker will speak for 40-ish minutes, somewhere in there, and then there'll be a question and answer period afterwards. So once Craig is all finished, feel free you can either submit your questions in the chat or you can actually unmute yourself and ask them directly if you'd like. And that'll go for a good 20 minutes or so. Some people will probably have to start heading off to various other appointments, but and we do want to make sure this doesn't go too late for you guys that have to get up bright and early in the morning and keep looking after wildlife. So with that, let me just introduce Craig Spencer for those of you who have not already met him. Craig Spencer is the warden of the Olifants West Section of the Balule Nature Reserve within Greater Kruger National Park, a position he has held for 14 years. He is also the retired head warden of the Balule Nature Reserve, the executive director of the nonprofit research and conservation organization Transfrontier Africa, director at Wild Animals Tracking Solutions, and the founder of the internationally recognized and awarded all-woman Black Mambas anti-poaching unit associated with the Bush Babies Educational Program. For those of us who are more familiar with wildlife management in our own countries, just for some context, Kruger National Park is one of the largest game reserves in Africa, covering over 7,500 square miles, or twice the size of Yellowstone for those of us in North America. It was South Africa's first national park, established in 1926, and as of 2002 is part of the Greater Limpopo Transfrontier Park, which links Kruger with the Gonarezu National Park in Zimbabwe and the Limpopo National Park in Mozambique. And it may include other protected or managed lands in the future, which could total over 36,000 square miles, so it's very large. Kruger provides habitat for all 5 of the big 5 game animals and has more species of large mammals than any other African game reserve, estimated to be about 147 species, including the largest population of rhinos in the world. Because of this, Kruger is also a target for chronic intensive poaching, ranging from local bushmeat poaching using snares to big game poachers equipped with night vision instruments, large caliber rifles, suppressors, telescopic sights, and other high-end equipment. So it's a bit of a different scenario than what we experience in North America, for those of us that are speaking from here. Mr. Spencer hails from Botswana. He received his bachelor's in ecology from Cape Town University and his master's in science and primatology from Oxford Brookes University. Following these degrees, Mr. Spencer became the manager of environmental and conservation services in the Overstrand Municipal District in the Western Cape of Africa, where he also initiated the anti-poaching unit to curb marine poaching. He also initiated several poverty relief programs and managed the buffer zone of the Kokelberg Biosphere Reserve. He became warden of Olifants West and established Transfrontier Africa in 2006. Transfrontier Africa helps coordinate and host international research projects, including several in the US for those of us that are from here, such as Western Kentucky University, University of Hawaii, University of Arizona, and University of Wyoming. They also host and volunteer an internship program, which I participated back in 2011. That's how I came to know Craig, and which is one of the most influential internships I ever had. Information about these opportunities will be provided after the talk for those who are interested. The Black Mambas anti-poaching unit, today's subject, was established in 2013 in order to provide locally based protection of rhinos, elephants, and other big game, as well as provide role models for the local community. Since then, the Black Mambas has been recognized internationally as a success, including being awarded in 2015 the Best Conservation Practitioner category in the South African Rhino Conservation Awards, and that same year, the Champions of Earth Award, which is the United Nations' highest environmental honor for recognizing visionary people and organizations which advocate for action on sustainable development, climate change, and a life of dignity for all. So without further delay, please welcome and give your attention to Mr. Craig Spencer.
Thank you very much, Sharon. Wow, I wish my mother was here to hear you say all those nice things about me. Going to employ you to write my curriculum vitae next. I'm going to quickly switch over to share screen, but I think you might have to give me the authority to do that. Let's see.
Yeah, I think John has already given that to you, so it should.
Oh, good. So, yeah, good show, good show. Here we go. My goodness, all my secrets are coming out now. You can see everything. Here is the presentation. It's going to be quite casual, but you know, this is from a lot of lessons learned in my time in conservation matters in the sub-Saharan African context. And I think that a lot of the lessons that we've learned could be used elsewhere in the world as well. We have consulted globally from Bolivia to the Philippines, in fact.
Dat weet ik ook wel.
And this, say again?
Wat denk je dat de hele tijd zit te doen?
Sorry, Anha, I think you're still unmuted there. If you could please mute yourself.
Audio en video.
Start videocamera icoon aandrukken.
Ja.
That's okay. I'll just quickly explain to you how the logo. So this is the logo that the Black Mambas chose for themselves, and it's two Black Mamba snakes. Okay, that's the most dangerous snake that you will find in Southern Africa, probably in the whole of Africa, and I mean the Australians would argue, but probably globally. And that's a little black rhino that you can see in the middle there as well. I'm just going to activate my pointer quickly. Laser pointer. So black rhinos are most endangered of all the rhino species in Africa. And the two Black Mamba snakes, the most dangerous, looking over its shoulder. So the mamba, the rhino can continue with its daily activities because the Black Mambas are guarding it, looking to the east and looking to the west, sunrise and sunset. That's when the poachers come in and exit the landscape. And behind it is the flag of South Africa. It's a proudly South African product. I keep looking behind me because there's something scuttling around and it's a mouse. That's fine, as long as it's not a hyena. Bondoro Game Lodge. So we have a number of partners. I obviously have to give them their credit. Our authenticity comes from the National Department of Environmental Affairs through the National Parks Board. So we're quite proud to be partners with them in the Balule Nature Reserve where we sit now. And of course, there's our other partner. That's very boring. Let's move swiftly along. There's the greater Kruger National Park that sits inside the boundaries of South Africa. Now, if you look up here, it's only 3% of the South African land mass, yet it's 3 million hectares in size, which is the size of a small European country. Israel could easily fit into the greater Kruger National Park, for example. Luxembourg, probably several times. Yeah. We love the Luxembourgers. It's multinational. Zimbabwe, Mozambique, and Swaziland is sitting down here. And it's got a multi-ownership model as well. So some of it is public land, some of it is private land, it's international land, it's tribal land. It's made up of a number of different ownership models. And that little badge where you can see the little buffalo head, that is where I'm sitting right now. There's only one fence, and that's the western boundary fence, and it creeps along in an odd fashion here. The fence that the Mambas are responsible for is 146 kilometers, which spans this piece over here. The park itself, by the way, is 430 kilometers, and it's really nice when they say, hey, can you please attend a meeting? We're sitting in Pafuri. I said, gee, that's nice. I have to leave now to make it there by Wednesday next week kind of thing, you know, in a Land Rover anyway. It's really far. But the odd thing about this park is, and for all of the ecology students out there, just look at how wide it is. At its widest point, if you take this light green part out here, that's a different ownership model. At its widest point, it was 60 kilometers. And for a mega herbivore like an elephant to move 60 kilometers in a night is not unheard of. It's very easy. The other significant thing is on our landscape, we're sitting at about 430 meters above sea level. We're on the coastal plain. Look at Mozambique sitting over there. And so, you know, if you see in the news that there's a typhoon or a cyclone approaching, then everybody panics and freaks out, and the Kruger Park floods out because we're actually on the coastal plain. The rivers are running from you know, it's gravity and all that, you know, from the highlands to the lowlands. Our watershed is sitting here. The rest of South Africa is at about 2,000 meters above sea level. And animals will follow the crude proteins. I don't want to go into too much detail because I'm not sure how, you know, what the demographics of our audience are. But the crude proteins are what animals look for on the landscape in the form of vegetation. You can imagine if you're a vegetarian or a vegan, you will always be told to eat your legumes because that's where the crude proteins are, and in the form of nitrogen in particular. Your body will convert that into biomass, to muscle fiber and so on. And therefore, during the drought periods, which lasts about 7 months every year, the animals are moving in a linear fashion along these water courses, bouncing off the old boundary fences. Agricultural practices encroached all the way up to this little western boundary here and an eastern boundary there. So we had huge conflict, human-wildlife conflict issues. Fences came down here, all the cattle ranches and whatever are now included into the landscape, and the wildlife has taken over, which is very nice. So we've reduced the human-wildlife conflict issues, but we still have elephants, lions, etc., breaking out on the side. So the park is long enough, but it's not wide enough. And when we design protected areas, we have to keep in mind, what are the natural movement patterns of animals, and particularly things like mega herbivores. And if you go through cycles, times of plenty and times of hardship every year, then the animals have got used to that. And in our case, it's an east and west migration movement primarily. Anyway, that's just a little bit of background. So I'd been here for quite a few years and everything was hunky-dory, and I was pursuing my academic pursuits. So I met Sharon and various other study abroad programs and what have you, and things were wonderful until we woke up one morning with a lot of rhino carcasses lying on the landscape. And we suddenly realized that we were being poached. We always had bushmeat poaching issues, but we could deal with it. We literally had one guy on a bicycle with a walkie-talkie and a stick. And that was our entire anti-poaching force for that area. And 2012 caught us with our pants down. And we had to think of something different. And nobody in the conservation arena is new to poaching. Poaching is a global problem. Illegal wildlife trade has been going on for centuries. So here we sat thinking, how the heck are we going to address this? So we had to approach partners. We're a humble NGO. The park had very little revenue stream. It's tourism primarily. And we decided to form a coalition with a number of organizations around the world, in Germany, in the United States, in the United Kingdom, in Denmark, all over the show. We approached partners and we said, guys, you all specialized in wildlife conservation in one way or another. How can we make this work? We obviously need revenue. And so we came up with a coalition mission to make the Greater Kruger National Park the most difficult and undesirable or risky place to poach. And we needed to develop a sympathetic and patriotic community on our borders. So there's no point in having the park as like a kind of fortified model, but on the border, you've got this militant community that's harboring criminals because of the whole Robin Hood philosophy. The kids sitting in the schools are saying, gee, why must I go to school and follow the rules when I can have a BMW and a fancy TV at the age of 18? If all I have to do is poach an elephant and a rhino. Easy peasy. So the role models become the poachers. It's like Robin Hood, and then I'm the sheriff of Nottingham, and I must run around and chase them, etc. And it's horrible. And imagine if we just enforce the law and we employ the old school model of detection, pursuit, and apprehension, and then pray for a conviction in the dodgy courts of Africa. We're going to fail on a massive landscape like this. So we had to look at a different thing. And everything that we do is going to have a lag period. If you put on an X and Y axis, any intervention, my camera is mirrored, so it's not the right way around. So if you put it on an X and Y axis, any intervention and you want to measure its success or the impact of it, you want to try and shorten that lag period as much as you possibly can. Anyway, so you can read that yourselves. That's very nice. There you can see my little mambas in training. The key strategies were to deploy effective boots on the ground. You can't rely purely on technology. You have to rely on covering vast distances with minimum people, if that makes sense. So it's got to be strategic deployment. We can't cover hundreds of thousands of hectares with people on foot. And then we're just going to displace the poaching that I'll show you a little bit later into the darkest hours of the night. And in fact, whilst I sit here now, a rhino was lost quite close to us last night. It's almost full moon. They wait until the moon is appropriate. And a rhino was shot. So, we need a combination of different things, but boots on the ground is the oldest trick in the book. You can't, and there's Stuart there in the Navy as well. You can't get away with just drones, cameras, satellites, this sort of thing. You need to have well-trained people on the ground. And then, of course, the technology as a force multiplier to aid them. When the sun goes down, the rangers can't see. So what do? You get cameras and night vision goggles and things that can help them. You put eyes in the sky. Then you realize that people hide weapons and what have you, and I'll show you some slides about that later. So what do? You get dogs, because their senses are 10 times or even more astute than ours are, and so on. And a pro-environmental ethos in the communities is critical to us as well. Just by the way, look at those pictures down there. This is how the Mambas arrive for their training, dressed in their very best clothes because they're applying for a job. They have no idea that they might be deployed to run around chasing wildlife and things. They could just as well be cashiers in a supermarket. So they arrive in their very best clothes to impress us. A week later, this is what you've got on the left-hand side. It's, the reason why we use the paramilitary model is because, yes, it's been tried and tested for thousands of years, but it builds a sense of identity, a sense of unity. There's personal pride and dignity in that uniform and in what they do. So they've got a skill set that the other people in the community don't. It sets them apart from the people in the community. All right, so this is all the boring stuff. I'll get over this very fast. The major objectives and the outcomes is we want to detect poaching early so that we can prevent the animals from dying. We're not here to take breadwinners, the fathers, the uncles, the brothers, the husbands out of the community and put them in jail or put them in body bags. That's not our model. Our model is to detect the crime and prevent the animals from dying. We're conservationists after all. Okay, monitoring, surveillance, and compliance. I tell everybody that my Mambas have all got an MSc. And they say, wow, that's impressive. Which university did they go to? It's monitoring, surveillance, and compliance. Okay, so we needed the window into the communities. And you can just imagine if you're making a lot of money out of poaching rhinos, there's not a lot of rhinos. I can't tell you how many there are because there's so much speculation about them. We can't count them. The landscape's too vast. So there's a lot of models and things that we use to try and model them. You guys that are in the academia will know jolly stochastic models, fingerprint recognition, pattern recognition on the ears and so on. So we do have our techniques, but I can tell you now, there's not a lot of rhinos. And at the rate of exploitation, that will fizzle out in the next 2 or 3 years. And then what's the next target species? But the point is, it's a high value species. So there's a lot of money drifting around in that community and gets splashed out in the bars and with prostitutes and all these kind of things. And that's what we talk about when we say social decay and a false economy. So everybody's engaged. The social decay is not just the poacher going out there, but his mother is now hiding the weapon under her floorboards in the shack. And the rhino horn is being smuggled out in the teacher's car when she's claiming to go and drop off library books, so on and so on. So every member of that community is somehow involved. Even the kids, I said, I'll give you 10,000 rands to carry this backpack from A to B. And how do you apprehend or even convict somebody when there's no mens rea? If you understand a bit about the Roman Dutch law that we have to work with here, you have to prove criminal intent. So if our objective is to get a conviction and that person is carrying a backpack and we arrest them because inside the backpack is an ivory tusk, let's say, or a lion skin or whatever it might be. He says, hey, I was paid a lot of money to carry this backpack. I didn't ask what was in it. We stop a vehicle and inside the vehicle is all sorts of contraband and what have you. The guy said, hey, I'm the only guy in my community with a car. I was paid a lot of money to pick up these hitchhikers and drop them off at another spot. What's in their bag has got nothing to do with me. So you've got no criminal intent. You're going to struggle to get a conviction. So we needed a different model. And we approached the tribal authorities. Everybody kind of thought, what the heck is this all about? Women normally collect firewood and they go to the rivers and fill up the water cans and dodge the crocodiles, and then they come home and they look after the kids, and then they cook our food, and then they clean the household, and then they repair the thatched roofs, and then they herd the cattle and make sure the kids are sorted out and la 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 la. What are they going to do in some sort of militarized environment? And they all put their sons' names forward for the job. I said, no, you guys don't seem to understand. It's really difficult in African context as well to see just from the names who's male and female, because it could be like or whatever, and you have no idea if that's like a feminine name or a masculine name. So we had to go back to the tribal council and say, no, guys, you don't seem to understand. We literally want your young women, your daughters and your nieces and what have you. They reluctantly agreed. And it wasn't that difficult to convince them. They still thought it was another crazy expatriate white guy's bizarre idea. But after 1 week, when we brought them onto the training ground, and you can see these mambas going through the paramilitary training, it's exactly the same as your basic training in any other military environment. Okay. And they were flabbergasted. They were tears. They said, wow, I cannot believe that that is my daughter, or that is my niece, or that is my sister, and so on. Absolutely incredible. And these girls were so proud to show off their parade skills and the obstacle courses and so on and so on. We first selected 6 just to demonstrate that it could work. And then we realized that our problem is not to convince the tribes anymore, because then all the neighboring tribes came to us and said, hang on, how come they got black mambas and we didn't get black mambas? So we want black mambas, you know? And so now we end up with 36 young women. That's all we can afford. I wish I had 136 young women, many of which are now mothers, sisters, aunties, wives, and they will eventually become the grandmothers. So people ask me, why did you select the women? What is the point of that? I said, listen, I am the warden, I'm the custodian of this landscape. I need allies, but I can't just have allies for a short snapshot. I need a multi-generational investment. When these young women go home, they are the primary caregivers in their communities. They are the ones that are tucking the kids into bed at night, looking after the elderly and the sick, looking after the chickens and the goats and what have you. They have already got an ethos of caring and nurturing, plus they are responsible for caring and nurturing in their communities. So it's a multi-generational investment. Can you imagine when my mambas retire one day? Heaven forbid, but they will have to. You know, they will be the grandmothers, and they will be telling these stories to their grandchildren. It's you know, it just makes so much sense to anybody. There's a little logo again, and there's a lovely blank screen. I know if I keep pushing, then things will happen. This is very boring, so I won't bore you. I think we've already gone through this, but just have a look at some of the pictures. Some of these you have seen before. The kind of training, I'm very proud of them. I have had a 0 dropout rate on the training course. We do the training course for a lot of men as well. The industry demands it. And the dropout rate with the men is up to 40% because they're arrogant. And they say, you can't talk to me like that. You can't tell me what to do. Stuart, you know exactly what I'm talking about. Okay, the guys, they break on parade. Not because they're unfit and what have you. It's because they're not used to being told what to do and how to do it and so on. And I keep telling these ladies, if you do not listen, you walking amongst elephants, lions, buffaloes, leopards, black rhinos, which are probably the most dangerous of them all, you know, so on and so on. Forget the poachers with their guns. The wildlife, you have to listen. There has to be discipline. You have to be fit. You have to be able to operate this equipment with no failure, you know, and I have to be comfortable to say, I'm going to deploy you at the end of the day. And they're very proud of the fact that there's a 0 dropout rate with these ladies. I've got so many anecdotal stories on the training course. You know, on the last day, they have a very long run with their full kit bag, and they have to make it pretty damn far. And Valeria, you're online now, and Leonie as well. And I think it's from the Olifants River all the way back to the training facility in Hoedspruit is 20-something kilometers. And one of the ladies collapsed on the side of the road. And I pulled up with my Land Rover and I said, you know, put your kit bag in the back. I'll take it about 10 kilometers ahead of you. And then just at the end, you put it on and you run in there and you say, hey, I made it. And she jumped up and she said, to hell with you. How dare you insinuate that I can't do this? How dare you? You know, and I thought, wow, I was actually trying to do something nice, you know, and they're so proud to be able to accomplish these things. There's my little cartoon that I stole off the internet. I think it's quite amusing. This is now the sad reality of where we sit on this landscape. This week, in fact, we have been engaged with a dehorning exercise, but this little cartoon, I think, was quite prophetic in the elephant, because elephants used to be persecuted much worse than the rhinos. And we always have to remember that when a false economy develops and there's a social decay, so the only skill set your community has is dodging the law, using a weapon, bribing officials, whatever it might be, then when the rhinos are gone, they will go for something else. The rhinos created a unique kind of stage or a platform for us. I've been a conservationist in this country for almost 25 years, and never before could we generate sympathy for a species as easily as we could for the rhinos. Elephants were being persecuted at 96 elephants a day were being wiped out. And we worked out that if that threat hit us in the Kruger National Park, where South Africa's only elephants are captured in that landscape, and there were more rhinos than elephants in the Kruger National Park in those days. If that threat came across our borders, we had 250 days of elephants left. That's it. And then we've lost a big five. And then we've lost our landscape architects or our ecological process drivers, etc. So these cartoons and things were flying around, and there's been some excellent work done to reduce the threat on elephants with the international ban on ivory trade and so on and so on. And you can see this little elephant saying there that I've had my tusks surgically removed and now I am of no value to the poachers. Who would have thought that we would be chopping off the horns of rhinos now? When that cartoon came out. Yo, double-edged sword there. Okay, so here you can see how the whole compliance model fits together. It's a very loose graph, but it's on a basic X and Y axis where you have a level of responsibility on the Y axis and the coverage or the hectares or whatever you want to call it covered on the X axis. The mambas fit in at the bottom here. They're the bobbies on the beach. If you ever go to London, you will see the unarmed bobbies. They're everywhere. And they're the eyes and ears. And they're smart in their uniforms and they're well spoken and they confront people and they ask what's going on here, you know, and you turn around and there's a bobby and then you think, gee, all I want to do is take a pee in the alleyway, but oh dear, what's this? You know, there's another body. The old traditional model only had this middle rung on the ladder, if you like, the tactical response team. So it was armed rangers. You know, you dust off your old army uniform and you take out your old rusty gun and you polish it up and off you go then and you fight fire with fire. And this is half of the problem with Africa and most of the third world countries as well. We kind of just want to suppress the problem, get it over and done with and carry on regardless. But it will come back and it will come back twice as strong. So in the Kruger Park context, when this problem raised its head again, we realized, wow, there's cell phone coverage across just about the entire landscape. There's no boundary fences anymore with our neighbors in Mozambique and Zimbabwe and so on. We have a huge tourism industry that's blossomed on the landscape. So there's access control issues. There are just people all over the show. And just in this region that I'm sitting in now, there's 384 people living on this landscape, scattered all over the show, looking after lodges and fixing roads and water holes and pipes and so on and so on. There's service providers flocking in to fix air conditioners and God knows what else, you know. It's and we realized that the landscape was terribly compromised. So we added this level. And then with the help of my good friend who's online, Dr. Nick van Doormal and others, we added this level, strategic deployment and management. So let's say I've only got limited resources. Where do I deploy them on that landscape? How the heck do you look after? Let me see. Okay, so let me finish with this slide first. I'm getting ahead of myself. So you can see we have a little ops rooms run by the Mambas themselves. And these guys should just concentrate in the hotspots. But how do you know where the hotspots are unless you haven't gathered data in the field? And then you need to know what kind of data do you gather in the field.
Thanks.
Yeah, and then the bobbies on the beach, that's our guys. They need to be institutionalized.
Alexa,
You know what I mean?
alarm off.
You know what I mean by institutionalized is it's really important that the people on the ground gather sufficient information about their beat, you know, the route, the area that they're responsible for. So they get to know the people. They can say, hey, that's Mrs. Jones dropping her kids off at school. Here comes an air conditioner repairman. He's obviously going to the Pondoro Lodge, you know, so on and so on. Rather than having a high turnover and you lose that institutional memory. If my Mambas that are patrolling now, whilst I'm sitting here and drinking rum and smoking my pipe and talking to you guys, there's teams of Black Mambas out there protecting this landscape, but they know their landscape so well. They were there this morning, they're there again tonight, and they'll say that rock was turned over in the meantime. Somebody snuck past here, kicked that rock or whatever, something's out of place. So you can't have a high turnover. You can't have, like, let's take the Vietnam War, for example. People in, do a short tour, people out. New people in, short tour, people out. Okay, our model is very different here. Institutional memory. And then, of course, the informant network feeding into the top. I think it's very rude. A lot of people ask me if this community involvement model is good for intelligence gathering. Of course it is. But at the same time, you're compromising their safety and they will be exposed because you can't have your cake and eat it. You know, either I want them patrolling every day and dancing around in front of the school children in their uniforms, or I want them sneaking around in a covert position gathering information. I can't have both. So we have to have a totally independent informant network. But the people in the village don't know that the Mambas are not watching them. They think the Mambas are watching them. And of course the Mambas do spill the beans. Have a look at that landscape. If they had said to me 14 years ago, Mr. Spencer, you please must protect this landscape here. And there's a whole bunch of people living there, all these hotspots. This is a kernel density assessment. This is a basic GIS model that anybody can put together on QGIS or ArcGIS or any of the other programs. Everywhere where you see the hotspot, that's where I've got the most people living permanently with cars, cell phones, walkie-talkies, blah, blah, blah. This is the kind of intelligence gathering that I'm talking about. Look at that little blob right there on the Olifants River. Then I've got mines, tribal land, railway lines coming through, 146 kilometers of provincial road, right or smack bang on my boundary. That's got no street lights and no nothing, but it's a beautiful tarred road that you can pull 160, 220 kilometers, like an autobahn. Yeah, you can, so just imagine, there's so many entrance gates, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 entrance gates. I know there's 5 entrance gates, I just don't know where they are now. So if somebody had said to me, protect that landscape, I would have said, how? It's impossible. I could never do it. It's so compromised. There's so many people living there that they've got access. They can sneak information out. They can come and go as they please because they have a right. They live there. I can't stop and search every vehicle. I can't stop and search every household and building site and contractor, etc. The Mambas gathered all the information for us. They just went out on a little mission in a little old beaten up Land Rover, visited everybody, populated a database of who's who in the zoo. And then we could link up and say, this guy belongs to that person. These are his bush skills. He's living below the bread line. They don't have access to potable water, blah, blah, blah. And therefore, they're probably the highest propensity to get involved in an illegal activity to make ends meet. They're the easiest to compromise, if that makes sense. So this is just some fantastical examples. Roadblocks to us are critical. It's an old technique, and everybody always laughs and says, so you put them in camouflage uniforms because you don't want them to be seen, and then you put a reflective vest on them so everybody can see them. Now you must make up your mind. You know, so it's amusing, but it's the uniform shows authority. The reflective vest is about our visible policing, our visual policing. We don't hide away. We don't sneak around in the bush. When we do our PT, our physical training, keep the Mambas fit and whatever, it's in the public eye. They must run where the public can see them in their kit and their gear. Say, look at me, look at me. I'm protecting this landscape and I'm proud and look what I am capable of. These roadblocks are great, but you can just imagine the first car coming along is going to phone back and say to all of his buddies, don't come here, there's a roadblock here. But then at least we know that that part of the landscape is secure for that period of the time. And then we'll move it around all over the show. That's an example of the kind of thing that's thrown out of a car's window when they come around the corner. It's a homemade weapon. It shoots a 375 projectile, which is, it's like lobbing a small motor vehicle at an animal out of the barrel. It's a massive caliber gun, but you can't take a rhino down without a big hunting rifle, the 458. You know, it's pretty much a 50 cal kind of weapon that you're looking for. It's a homemade silencer. It's made out of a mag light, and they just knock the insides out and stuff it full of steel wool and block it on the front. That's a piece of piping and a handle from an old drill or an angle grinder or something that they found in the garage. This whole contraption over here has frightened the heck out of me. We didn't actually test this weapon out, but when we did a ballistic test on this weapon, we found that this gun had been responsible for 6 rhinos being taken down. Can you believe it? I mean, who the hell would have thought? Anyway, what does this tell us? There sits my wildlife crime analyst online, so I have to be very careful what I say, otherwise he won't pour me another drink. But when I take one look at this weapon, I can see how the poacher's behavior has changed. They're no longer brazen enough to come in and just shoot a thing. They've got a silencer on the front, which means they don't want to be detected. It means their operation is compromised. They have to remain silent now. So they've tried to suppress their weapon so that the Mambas can't hear them at nighttime, which is great. Also, because so many weapons were confiscated in that time, illegal weapons, they now made their own. So it's no longer easy to access a proper, efficient hunting rifle. They have to compromise their operation by making their own weapons. The sad thing is that it creates a spin-off industry. So somebody in that community has access to a lathe and understands weapons and will make this, and it's a secondary industry. Anyway, we, you know, anything that you do in conservation or anything in the world, actually, after all, we are scientists, eh, Sharon? So we have to consider all of our interventions. Are they working? Are we wasting funders and donors' money? Or Are we achieving our objectives? How do we measure that? So we have to put mechanisms in place to measure the effectiveness of our interventions. So we approached Dr. James Danoff Berg, Living Desert in California, a really, really good social scientist and a quantitative scientist as well. And they came down to the team and spent quite a lot of time with the Mambas, put together a methodology, and some of the key findings that came out of their research was very encouraging. This is quite recent. This was 3 years ago. So through experiences and skills development, the Black Mambas experienced a tremendous growth in self-esteem and efficiency, which is great. But the most significant thing for me was in the workplace and at home. So they're much more confident in their communities. You know, who would have thought that they'd be driving 4x4s amongst elephants and lions, talking on walkie-talkies, tracking, etc. The second key finding, 100% of the Black Mambas report the program has fundamentally changed their beliefs about what women can do. And in this day and age, this is critical. The men want to jump out of helicopters with Belgian Malinois strapped to their chests and night vision goggles and their 7.62 automatic weapon and all that kind of thing. These ladies are quite happy to just sneak around and take out all the poachers' traps and detect everything and tell us all about the, you know, there's no ego, is what I'm saying. The ego is not there, which is great. Community residents of all the 4 target communities, those are the tribal communities that sit on our boundaries, okay, value wildlife and protected areas on an average of 8 out of 10. Now, if we weren't under so much pressure when the rhino poaching started, we would have been able to gather baseline data. So I'm not sure if in 2010, that would have been a 2 out of 10, but for you know, and then we can show that we've had a massive improvement. But it's still significant for me that that value system is 8 out of 10 in those communities. That's very heartening. All the 4 target communities recognize and are encouraged by the benefits of the big 5 landscape. That's through tourism, job creation, skills development, you know, the fact that people come from all over the world to come and see these things, and revenue flows through the communities. Here's another example. My armed patrol walked past here and didn't care about the tortoise stuck under the bottom strand. This is the western boundary fence that I showed you on the map earlier. And these Mambas patrolled it on foot. And this little tortoise got stuck under the bottom strand, which we put down to stop predators and predators getting out and people getting in. And this tortoise would have shocked itself to death. The Mambas found it and took it out. I think, and Valeria is online now, but I think we're probably sitting at well over 200 tortoises that get rescued, pangolins and all these other little things, because they care. They're not here just to exercise their trigger finger and to play Rambo and whatever. They actually care about the work that they do. And they're proud, and they take these pictures, not me. These are the pictures they send me from their cell phone. Canine units, very important. Like I said before, dogs have got skill sets and senses that are far outcompete human beings. We have to rely on dogs quite a lot. But the key finding here is that members of all 4 target communities are highly unsupportive of poaching. And something that we realized is this is all good and well, but when they go home, their dogs are chained under trees, baking in the heat. They don't get water, they don't get food. They're just a commodity. They protect their chickens from jackals and hyenas and so on. Donkeys pull carts, you know, cows provide meat and leather, so on and so on. So we thought by starting a canine unit, we are going to be able to bring a certain ethos in that says animals feel stresses. They're not just a commodity. And
This one has no seeds in it.
you know, anybody here, if you ask them, what's that animal? All the animals are called nyamazana, which is just basically meats. You know, how many meats did you see today? Oh, I saw lots of lovely meats. You know, so we had to try and get this ethos back into the community. It's not good enough to say I'm protecting the animals on that side of the fence because it's my job. It has to actually become part of a lifestyle where you say that dog's lying under that tree with a chain around its neck. It's overheating. It needs water. It needs food. I'm coming up to check on you again tomorrow. Sort it out. And you can only really do that. Well, I can only really do that if I integrate a canine unit into the team where these dogs become their partners. And they love these dogs. And the dogs love them. Role models. Like I said before, we needed to replace the old traditional Robin Hood role model-y kind of ethos. These ladies are the go-to girls in their community now. And their kids are going to the same schools as the poachers. They're getting water from the same taps. They're shopping in the same little shops. So it's very important that we don't compromise them, but they've become the role models, especially during COVID. It's fantastic. They got pride, they got dignity. You know, they're not going to let anybody else wear that uniform unless you've been through the same training. Yeah, and you can walk your 20 kilometers a day in 46 degrees Celsius heat, and you can put up with the boss. Then you can wear that uniform. This is just an example of one of the pickets that we have up in the north. So they're deployed because the landscape is so big. They're deployed all over the show, and their lifestyle is pretty rough out here. Electricity is very limited if you've got it at all, and you've got to collect your own firewood. The wild animals will come right. If you want to go to the bathroom at nighttime, you must leave that building and go to another building. And sometimes there's a hippopotamus standing there, or an elephant, and they will stand there the whole night. So you have to prepare yourself. And then I expect them to be up again with the cleanest, smartest uniforms, with polished boots, etc., on a foot patrol in the public face, stopping things, searching for things, checking things, logging things, reporting things. Nighttime, it's a bit dangerous to go strolling around on foot. Something's going to squash you or eat you. So we deploy them in Land Rovers, and they disrupt the landscape. Poachers do not want to be detected. We worked this out already. They put sponges under their shoes to disguise their footprints. And this is all now recent stuff. In the beginning, they were like, hey, I could just camp on the landscape and do whatever I like. And they would shoot rhinos in the daytime, and they would spend a week or more on the landscape and live off the land at the same time. And we got onto this. Now it's a snatch and grab operation. And if we disrupt the landscape, they go somewhere else. They say, hey, man, this place is hot. I don't want to get caught. That's why I've got a silencer on my gun. That's why I have to go to the witch doctor. It's a sangoma. It's a traditional healer, and get all these little blessings, to protect myself against bullets, to make sure I can cross the Olifants River without getting eaten by crocodiles, and all these various things. And we've seen that one. Thank you very much. Now, one of my most exciting things, and this came out of Dr. James Danoff-Berg's research as well. In the communities where we had Mambas working in the schools, as educators in the schools, that lag period that I was talking about before. So you employ Black Mambas and you want to achieve these goals. It could take 5 years or a generation, and we just keep monitoring and praying to God that we're going to reach our obligations. Where we had them in the schools, that lag period was like a year. It was insane. Literally in 1 year, what we were trying to achieve with the community had achieved its objectives. I don't know if I'm making myself clear, because they're teaching the kids are taking it back home, whatever. So we now sit with 10 local primary schools and 1,300 primary school children in this Bush Babies program with 7 full-time Mambas. We call it the Bush Babies program. It's a prosimiad, anyway. And they mobilize the community. They interact with the community daily, every single day. Now with COVID, we hit a bit of a snag because the schools were closed and nobody could go to school. And one of the things that we realized is that the kids were sent to school by their parents, not so much to get an education, yes, sure, but because we were feeding them a meal every day. And when COVID came along, those kids sat at home without access to that meal. And that was very hard. But the Mambas come up with a solution. We now have our own resource center where all the kids go every single day. Probably breaks every COVID rule in the book, but hey, you're either going to die of starvation or you're going to get the coughs. You must decide now. This is Africa. Anyway, we are non-conformists out here, as you all know, those of you that have been to camp. So this is what those old schoolrooms and things looked like before. And Mambas can move in over weekends. And this is off-duty Mambas. The other ones are still patrolling in the reserve. This was over the December holidays, in fact. And when you look again, that's what it looks like inside. Guys, I must tell you, when you walk into one of those classrooms, it's 46 degrees Celsius outside in summertime here. You walk into that classroom, it's 56 degrees Celsius. You get a little app on your phone and you can measure the temperature. How is a child expected to learn? Not only is he sitting there hungry, he hasn't had a meal for 24 hours, he's had to walk God knows how far. And now the rivers are swollen. We've had a lot of rain, so they can't cross without dodging crocodiles, etc. Some of them come on donkey carts, whatever it might be. Then they have to sit in that classroom under those conditions. And there's not even any stimulating material on the walls. Like, where's Mickey Mouse and Donald Duck or something, just something that they can feel like, where's the colors and a My Little Pony or whatever's going on in the world these days? Maybe it's a Teenage Mutant Ninja Geckos. What was it? So we have to create a conducive learning environment and a conducive teaching environment. So just as difficult as it is for a teacher to perform under these conditions, it's difficult for the kids to learn under these conditions. So we wanted to make it nice for both the teacher and the students. At the end of the day, it's stimulating, it's nice, it's got fans on the ceilings, and you can see that. So we brought the temperature in the classrooms right down. They get their big meals and everything is tra-la-la. Oh my goodness, I skipped a thing. And then along came COVID. Everything was working so well. And this was a 9-year investment. was 8 years, and then COVID hit us, and we thought, shit, you know, we've taken a lot of donor funding and everything, and now because everybody's sent home, and that 9-year investment is going to be lost because the people are hungry, they have no jobs, they have no choice. And how am I supposed to ask a Black Mamba to arrest their uncle, brother, sister, mother, whatever it might be, when all they're trying to do is put food on the table? The tide's turned. This is no longer a syndicated supply and demand chain that's been fed in the East. This is now a survival strategy for people to poach. So we had to put various mechanisms in place. And what we did realize is that for the international trade, so there's no real market for rhino horn inside the boundaries of South Africa. It's all going to the East, to China, Vietnam, and various other places. But the fact that the borders were closed interrupted the supply and demand chain, and the rhino poaching dropped off the face of the earth. I say that now, but we lost one last night, so it's not all hunky-dory. The informants, the people that live on the landscape, no poacher can be successful unless they have somebody on the inside. Okay, those guys, because they're not essential services, were all sent home. So they're all sitting at home. They can't give information to the poachers. They became redundant. Information is currency, by the way. You'll find that anywhere. I don't care what national park you work in or what line of work you work in, that there wouldn't be even such a thing as industrial espionage if it wasn't worth money. Okay, so where are the rhinos? Where are the law enforcement people? How do I get in and out? Can you open the gate for me without logging me in on the system or whatever? Here's 10,000 Rand. Those people no longer existed because of COVID. And then, of course, we had a higher law enforcement presence on the reserves because we were the only ones left. So now, if I see, it's uncluttered. In other words, I've got a point there that says uncluttered landscape. If I see a light or hear a gunshot or whatever, I don't have to say, it might be a hunter, it might be a game lodge, it might be this, it might be a tourist, it might be a visitor. No, there's nobody on this landscape. If I see a light or something, it can only be a poacher. So that makes your life twice as easy. So yeah, a huge reduction in poacher effort. No increase in snaring. I say that now, but Nick is listening, so I must say that there's been maybe a 6% increase in snaring. What you see on the social media is this huge, oh my God, the national parks have been overthrown by the poachers now, overrun, or whatever it might be. They've been invaded and so on. That's not true. Okay, that's just the NGOs out there potentially trying to, you know, keep the momentum up so that their funding doesn't dry out. But what we found is that and you would have thought that snare poaching, which is like setting a piece of wire to catch an animal, very indiscriminate, but you can't measure something unless you've got baseline or unless your monitoring technique has been consistent. So you can't suddenly send a team into an area that you've never been to before and you pull out, let's say, 5 weapons under a bed and 600 snares, and you say, oh my goodness, the snare problem it's out of control. You can't do that unless you've been there 10 times before and you've done the same thing at the same time and you found nothing, or much less than what you found now. So we're lucky in that we've been monitoring for 8 or 9 years, and we have enough data to be able to tell you that the bushmeat problem has not increased significantly yet. Okay. So I've mentioned all the other things. Results and trends, you can see how the rhino poaching reached its peak and then started tapering off, and we're sitting, Nick will correct me if I'm wrong now, I'm sure, but we're sitting at about a 33% reduction in rhino poaching, which is hugely significant out here. The interesting thing is that, you know, when I haven't got the 2020 figures, I need to update my graph. When the dehorning started, everybody said the last ditch attempt to save the species to cut the horns off their faces. And we objected, and we said, hang on a second, you know, this thing only really has one value, and that's its horn, whether it's to a poacher or a tourist. To cut it off, it looks like a big fat jelly baby running around on the landscape. You know, it's really, you can't tell the difference between a hippo and a rhino now. But we were overruled. The authorities said it's the only way to save the species, but the poaching effort and the poaching success had already declined to such a degree that we thought it wasn't necessary. I blanked out the names of the regions up here, except that they're still written at the top there. So I failed in blanking them out, but just pretend you didn't see that. So we've got 3 comparative regions, and they are all contiguous with each other on the landscape, but they have 3 different models to manage. So there's 3 different models, but what I'm trying to point out here is who was the most successful at the end of the day. Obviously this lot here. I just leave it up to you to decide. There you can just see the trends. It's quite interesting to see how things have dropped off. I put this, you know, one of the most significant declines in poaching that we ever saw was when we removed one informant that we found that was giving information out to the poachers. If you've got a poaching problem on your reserve, you must know there's somebody inside that's leaking the info out. And it could be, we've had chefs at lodges, like literally people that cook pastries and things, and they have been responsible for smuggling weapons in and so on. So it's not fair to say that it's only the field rangers, the game rangers, or the soldiers or whatever that are leaking the information out. That's not true. It's actually turned out to be mostly other people that work road maintenance and what have you. He can bring somebody in on his grader or bring the weapons in on his grader. But that's had the biggest effect on our trends to reduce the poaching, has been to find out who it is that is leaking the information to the poachers and to neutralize them. There's a number of ways you can neutralize a threat. And in this case, we would just move them out of the arena so that they become redundant. So he's now sitting somewhere else and he's got no access to the information that the poachers need. How do we measure our successes? We've already spoken about the Black Mambas, but that's all very nice and well to say, yay, the community loves us and they love the wildlife, but is it actually helping the rhinos? We must measure that. And okay, you can see how the successful rhino poaching events to unsuccessful rhino poaching events was measured. So that means a poacher will come in, attempt to poach, and drop his guns and run away, screaming for his mommy because he sees a Black Mamba vehicle approaching, or whatever it is. They basically leave empty-handed without killing anything. And that's a significant thing to measure. These are divided into quarters because that'll tell a different story. Look how we've displaced them. You normally don't stop a poaching event very easily or an illegal activity very easily, but you can displace it, and you can displace it in time and space. So we want to displace them on the landscape. We want them to say, hey, we're not going to poach this area. This area is too hot. It's the chances of getting caught or detected here are hectic. So let's go somewhere else. And we say, yay, then it's somebody else's problem. It's not very nice, but at least then. And then of course, you want to push them into suboptimal times. So every poacher wants to poach in full moon. Look at 2017. So easy because you can see where you're going. If you use a torch, a flashlight, you guys call them flashlights, we call them torches, head torch or whatever, you're going to be seen. One of our patrols is going to see you using your torch. So they had to use the full moon. Then we changed our strategy around, and then they were operating outside of the full moon period. So that shows us that we have had a bit of an influence on them. We've displaced them both on the landscape and in time. And I think my next, oh God, we've got to go through that all shenanigans. Okay, there it is. Okay. So have a look at the rhino carcasses that were detected on our landscape. Again, it's a kernel density assessment. So the darker the blob, the more dead things. No, sorry. Just have a look at this. Is the rhino population density. The darker the blob, the more rhinos exist there. But look at all the little triangles are where we had a rhino poached in those days. You can see how it progressed 2016, 17, 18. And then by 2019, we'd pretty much got things very much under control. And what's really significant here is what Nick picked up, actually. They're using the railway line. This is the railway line that comes through because they can't rely on the full moon to see what they're doing. They're using landmarks, telephone poles, whatever it is, to navigate at nighttime and taking the rhinos along that route. So for anybody that's in the military or in the law enforcement arena, what we really wanted to do was pull them deep into the landscape. So any water holes or anything that were on the periphery, like in the olden days, look at that hot spot there. We wanted to make sure that the rhino is the target must be deep on the landscape, which means the poacher has to penetrate far and run a lot of risks. The longer you're on the landscape, the more risky it is for you. You're going to be detected. Because if they do shoot an animal, we will detect that, and they've got a long way to get out. That means I can get dogs, helicopters, and everything up in the sky and get onto them. But if they're just coming through the fence, killing a thing and getting out, my window of opportunity is that big to apprehend or even to disrupt. I need a lot of depth on the landscape. You can't even put a tracking dog on a guy that's shot a rhino there, because by the time you deploy the animal, the people are out. They hear your car start, they see you approaching, etc. But this is the significance of this, is how it peaked in 2017, then it started dropping off when we finally got our act together and we figured everything out. And it's down at a very, very manageable level now, which I think is pretty cool. Somebody asked me a while ago, can you make some predictions about what's going to happen now because of COVID-19? And I said, yo, man, I'm not Nostradamus, but and it's really dangerous to make predictions in this arena, because hey, if you're right, you're going to be a hero, but if you're wrong, you're going to be lambasted. But there are certain assumptions that we can make, and in the short term, and we've kind of proved that that is correct now. I wrote these predictions last year, June, I think it was. The local markets. So remember, with illegal wildlife harvesting, there's two markets. There's the international wildlife trade. That's a terrible thing. It's crossing borders. It's supplying the East for Chinese traditional medicine and whatever. That's a different kettle of fish. The local markets, the guy killing a thing here and he's consuming it here within the boundaries. Social grants during lockdown will continue to benefit wildlife. Therefore, the bushmeat trade, I think, is going to be minimal. And that's happened. And you know, the government pays people to stay there, which is great. International illegal wildlife trade, the borders remain closed, supply and demand chain interrupted. Very good. That's worked out. In the medium term, the local market social grants will run out, increased bushmeat demand. And Nick, I think we need to have a look and see that little 6%. You know, we've detected that quite recently now. Let's hope that doesn't become 12%, and then exponentially 24%, and so on and so on. The international wildlife trade continued downward trend for rhinos. I still believe that that's going to be a thing. But in the long term, if this COVID shenanigans carries on for much longer, I think you're going to find that bushmeat and things are going to be syndicated. There's going to be a local supply and demand chain forming, and there'll be local markets, and there will be people that specialize in it, and they will defend their trade. So they're probably going to deploy the same kind of techniques. You know, now it's a guy that sneaks in, sets a wire snare, and then checks up on it every now and again. But if every time they come back and they find that the wire snare has been removed by the unarmed Black Mambas, he might be forced to come in and defend that, because that's his trade. So it might get more militant. And then, of course, the international wildlife trade. I think when international travel resumes, we're going to see a spike again in rhino poaching. It's back to the same level though. It'll never get back up there. It's like a NiCad battery. It'll never recharge right up there. But it will come back. Yeah. What else have we got? Oh, now we have to go through that. Sorry, it's going bolder and bolder and bolder. And it's the last one. Guys, I know I'm talking a lot, but I've never spoken so much in my life without vast quantities of rum, and here I am. So in conclusion, I think we've said it all already. I need to maybe conclude by saying not one glove fits all. The Mambas are unarmed. They are backed up with armed response, but the significance is that the investment in the unarmed and community projects is right up here. That's where the majority of our budget goes. More than 70% is going into those projects, and the rest is left over for research and the armed response to that. Whereas in other budgets on other protected area landscapes, it's exactly the other way around, where the community is getting very little focus and very little input and so on. And I think that has been our biggest success, is that, you know, eventually we've got to hand this protected area over as managers. We can't manage it forever, and we can't keep our fingers in the dikes forever. That's a Dutch saying, by the way. That's not in the Hoedspruit context, because it could be misconstrued. But we're keeping back the flood waters. And and I have to hand this over to the next manager, and I want to be able to say, there's the phone number of the chief in the village, and all the headmasters and what have you of the schools. Phone them anytime. If an elephant breaks out, goes marauding around there, they phone me and they say, hey, can you come and get your elephant, please? But in the past, they would phone and say, I killed your elephant. What are you going to do about it? You know, so there's been a shift in values. This boundary fence that you saw the Mambas walking up and down on, that doesn't separate people from the park. Anybody can come into this park. There's 5 access control points. You can pay very little money as a South African, and you can enter the park, and you can have a wonderful wildlife experience if you want to. But it's separating values. We value things differently because we're affluent enough. I can sit here with my fire burning behind me. I've got all kinds of gadgetry here that makes me able to speak to you across the globe. I've got a glass of something sick and wrong in here. I don't know what it is, but it's nice. And, you know, whilst the other guys are sitting on the other side of the fence, they're worrying about how they're going to get their children across a swollen crocodile-infested river to school, you know. So we've got to put things into context. It's very rude of us to say, come onto this landscape and I'll put you in jail. If you don't have a permit, I'll put you in jail. We've got to we've got to win the hearts and the minds and the souls. And even if people, my mother would never visit me here because it's like, oh my goodness, there's cockroaches and mice, forget the big five. She's just not a bush person, but she can understand and the values in these things. And that's all we're asking. We're not saying that everybody needs to be a lover of wildlife and want to come here with a camera and everything, but they need to see the value and understand the value and appreciate the value. And it's 3%. We're not asking for a lot. It's literally 3% of South Africa's land mass. There's my little ladies. We brought rhino snaring, rhino poaching is the snares. We brought it down to 90-something%. I'm almost tempted to say 96%, but I haven't seen the recent data. Insane. It's old at the top there. It's hugely significant. Anyway, Sharon, back to you.
Right. Thank you, Craig, so much. That was fantastic. Thank you so much for that presentation. So now we're going to have a bit of a question and answer time. I imagine some people probably have to leave and might kind of trickle out depending on if they're moving over to classes or anything else. But you can type or actually just unmute yourself and ask. Unmute yourself and you can ask the question directly that way. Or John, if you want to let people chat, we can decide if that'll work still.
I actually
Madison,
have.
how you doing? Oh, sorry.
Oh, sorry. If it's all right, I actually have something I'd like to say. Craig, you mentioned that it was in 2012 when you really tried to make a change with how you handled the poaching situation, right?
Mm.
I remember because I was there with you in the summer of 2012. I believe it was June 2012 to all the way through to July. I remember you brought in these two former Navy SEALs, and we went on this poacher patrol to basically investigate this house that we believed was holding poached meat. So yeah, I saw firsthand how you were trying to change the way you handled the whole poaching situation. Like you started off that way, now you've developed into a full-on program and all.
Yeah,
with the
thanks,
Black Mambas.
I remember those early days. Wow, we were so astounded when we started sweeping through the reserve and looking in everybody's houses. We were flabbergasted. We've been living here for 6 years, researching everything. And we had no idea, when we searched those houses, we found elephant parts and all sorts, we had to get flatbed trucks to remove.
They were right under your
illegal
noses.
wildlife products. Yeah, exactly. All the time. The Mambas found out exactly because they snoop around. They go sit around the fire with somebody and chat to them, and they gather the information in situ. I'm so proud of those ladies. You guys have got no idea how much value they've brought to this landscape. It's incredible. They will be invited into a lodge to address international clients from overseas and speak about the work that they do. I can't get one of the old armed rangers to do that because it's just going to say big gun, shoot shit, very cool, helicopters, lovely. So there's there's a very different set of values amongst the women in the tribal communities, and I want to really emphasize that we need to bring those values into the conservation arena. It's critical. Those values should not be sitting behind computers and making tea and coffee for chief directors and what have you. Those values need to actually be deployed in the field as well. So traditionally in my arena, the women that were employed in conservation were pretty much office bound secretaries, that administrative function and so on. And they were never really given an opportunity to express. And where we found the weaknesses in the entire model is I could not find a training facility that was women friendly. It's, so when I brought in my first 6, I had to approach an accredited training academy because we weren't accredited to offer the training. And they had to now integrate with another 90 men. They have to sleep in the same sleeping bags. You know what basic training is like for those of you that have been in the military. You're showering naked amongst a whole bunch of men, and in a tribal context, you have to be cognizant of the fact that this is not going to work. So we had to remodel the entire industry to make it women friendly. it's just not appropriate that a young girl who's going to be, I mean, sold for lobola sounds horrendous, but you know, they've set up for marriage somewhere in the community, or they want to market themselves, and yet they are now stuck in this 90-day training facility with all of these guys. Not
It's
fair.
funny. It's funny you mentioned that, because at Navy boot camp, they used to have the compartments that the recruits would stay in used to be co-ed, both men and women. But then I arrive in there and it's all one gender. You know, one compartment is for men, one compartment is for women, because like there's a lot of like mingling between the boys and girls, you know. And what you say about like the whole shower situation, you know, it can really make someone feel uncomfortable.
Awkward.
And
exactly.
Yes.
Exactly. No, thanks, Stuart. You know, you and I both have our military backgrounds. You're currently in the military at the moment. Another thing that was quite significant for me is when we got approached to start these projects all over the globe, and we kind of held back a bit because the ethos was, I'm a man running this protected area landscape. I want to take women and convert them into little men. You know, and then I will claim success and say, yay, look, my little girls, I've shaved their heads and I've painted war paint on them and they can do exactly what a man can do. I said, what the heck? Why didn't you just employ men then? You know,
you sound like from Mulan, I'll make men out of you.
Yeah. No, we want women in the industry because of the values that they bring, you know, not because we can train them to be men. That's defeating the entire purpose here. I don't want a young mother tucking her children into bed at night after she's just been in a firefight with a bunch of poachers, a poaching gang or whatever, because in South Africa, we don't have the safety nets that you might have in Europe and in the United States, where if you go through that kind of trauma, you have counseling and, you know, somebody brings you a box of chocolates and a big fluffy teddy bear. That's not going to happen out here. You're back on duty the very next day. And yet you've got to go.
I get that.
Yeah, and that psychological trauma is going to be passed on to your kids and your community. And then that's going to become even cool because you'll have to find defense mechanisms. And the kids are going to go to my Bush Babies program and say, my mommy shot your uncle, you know, or something like that. You know, I don't want that. I want them going back home and saying, wow, mommy saw beautiful elephants drinking out of water holes and there were lions on the road and blah, 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 blah. There's so many things that we have to change. When we started, Stuart, you'll remember, we had men with machine guns, and that's how, and we threw that at the poaching problem. We had to take their cell phones away so they couldn't leak information out. It was very disciplined and whatever. We suddenly realized,
even take any pictures.
Absolutely, you weren't allowed to take pictures. You weren't allowed to post anything on social media. Nothing like that. It was full on old school military shit. And Madison, you'll remember from your time here as well. I'm really happy to see you online, Madison. A beautiful dog you've got, by the way.
Thank you.
We suddenly realized, hi, Madison has been so fantastic for us doing our game counts, writing our reports and all that kind of thing.
It's really nice to see you again and to see you at the camp. And
Thanks.
hopefully, I don't know if Kiwi would get herself killed in camp or not. I've contemplated bringing her eventually, but we'll see. I don't know if she's got the brains to survive at camp.
I don't know if I've got the brains to survive much longer. But so we suddenly realized that these are young mothers. And if they can't keep contact with their families, you know, they're leaving their children at home in somebody else's care. So my members carry cell phones. I encourage them to post things on social media. I encourage them to show their communities, this is what I do for a living. How many of you can drive a Land Rover amongst the elephants and sit here in the bush at nighttime listening to, look at the elephants here, look at the lions there, this kind of thing. So, you know, so we had to change, and we got a lot of flack for it in the arena, but we bit the bullet and we persisted. And you know, they've grown so much. They're so outspoken now, and they stand up for their rights in the community. That's one of those findings in that thing. So it's not, you know, and they realized that the wildlife landscape gave them those values, and they take that back to their families. I don't want to put guns in the hands of young mothers and things, and the poachers sitting on the outside. They've got one thing in their mind: come in here with a rusty old homemade thing and shoot a rhino. Now, if they see my Black Mambas stomping up and down with machine guns in their hands, they're going to go back home and say, isn't there an off-duty security guard somewhere? Nice ferrets, Chris. that can maybe come in for 10,000 rands and bring his shotgun or his 9mm to defend me against these mambas. So I'm going to actually, it's a bit of a force continuum. And our arms race is not with weaponry. Our arms race is with technology and values. That's what we've got to outcompete these guys on. And this is a lesson for everybody to learn when you're dealing with a protected area. Even in the United States, you're going to have tribal issues with the first people of the United States. You're going to have to address this in a different way. If there's anybody from New Zealand here, you think you guys are hunky-dory. I was in New Zealand a couple of times giving similar talks to this and what have you, and with their tribal issues and so on. You guys have got to address this differently. If you want to build resilience for the landscape, you have to change the values of the people on the outside. This is not an elitist playground that we're sitting in here. We stand for biodiversity conservation. Anyway.
I am here.
Craig, we've got some questions in the chat for you. Lou V asks, I'm sorry, Stuart, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
No, I'll wait. Someone else can ask a question, then I'll come back.
Okay, so Craig, what's next for Balule and the Mambas is what Lou V asks.
That's a very good question.
Good to see you.
Hey, Lou, nice to see you all the way from the United Kingdom. Very good.
Hi.
Lou is employed in the Environmental Protection Agency equivalent in the United Kingdom as well. Very nice to see you. I walked all the way from Streatham Hill to Marble Hall to have tea with you, and I've still got the hole in my foot from those hideous shoes. But so yes, what is next for the Black Mambas? What we would really like to do, and we're in the process of doing it now, is to set up an academy where any young woman from around the world can be trained in wildlife security at a Black Mamba Academy. So you can go away with a skill set, and that skill set includes social media management. Because, an example is the Mambas had a photograph taken of themselves standing next to a tame cheetah, and half of the world lambasted them, and they were like so hurt. They were like, why did everybody hate us for this? Animals in captivity, petting zoos, that kind of thing, they were lambasted. So we have to manage the social media. They have to understand how technology works. This is not get out there with a notebook and a pencil and draw with a crayon on a map stuff anymore. Tracking, tags, proper platforms on Android systems, operations room management. There's so many, and we can't find a training course that offers this. And also how to retain your values as a woman. When my ladies go off, they're 21 days on in the bush, and then they go home for 10 days. When they go home to see their husbands again and what have you, I don't want G.I. Jane knocking on the door and saying, hi, hubby, I'm home. I want them arriving with lipstick and looking really nice. Stuart, you recently married. Congratulations on that.
Thank you.
And so I think you understand what I'm saying now. You've
yeah.
been away for 21 days. Why would you want to send that woman home smelling like campfire, and with no hair and all this kind of thing? No. When we have a parade, it's a fashion parade. I want to see lipstick and earrings and the whole bang shoot. You women, you celebrate the fact that you're women. Damn it, you must take my damn job eventually. Anyway, does that make sense? That's where the Black Mambas are going. They're going to become, Lou, they're going to become hopefully self-sufficient as well. So we bought them the farm, as you know. They've got their 220 hectares of land now. There's 160 beehives that have been placed there by Elephants Alive, our partners. And so we need to actually find ways to keep them financially active, because I can't rely on donor funding for the rest of their lives. And the next step is to set them up as a SMME, a small micro macro enterprise, where they can offer their services to the private game farms and reserves around as a security intervention. Because we know we're going to displace the poaching problem onto the private reserves outside our area. And then I need to be able to say, hey, Olile, why don't you go and give them a quote, give them a quotation and say it'll cost you 10,000 Rand or whatever to sweep this area and remove all the snares. And I'll do that once a month for you with my team or whatever, so it's financial management skills. It's a little bit of bookkeeping and accounting and registering them as a SMME and so on. Those are the long-term plans.
So tying into that, I think Laura has a question of what made you want to empower women?
Okay, so first of all, women look much sexier in the uniform. But apart from that, I'm teasing you all, but we all know it's true. But I grew weary, once in fact, I would almost like to say that conservation management policy, etc., should probably be done by anthropologists, not ecologists, because if you can't understand the cultural anthropology behind the conflict between protected areas and whatever it is that drives people, even the non-conflict people that come and visit your park, you need to understand these subtle nuances and the values that parks bring or deny, and so on. And then from that, you keep ecologists and things in your toolbox to answer certain questions. Excuse me, they've poured me a very strong rum here. So I knew that if we were going to win this landscape, and we have to deal with socio-political issues daily in this place. Every time our president speaks, we poop ourselves. You know, everybody's got a little portable radio that you tune in, and you know, you're so scared to hear what he's going to say next. You're scared to open the newspaper because the borders just close down because they say something stupid, or they make a ban, or they change the visa requirements, and then you can come in, but you can't bring your children. I mean, it's just it's a shit show for the tourism industry. So it's socio-political and it's socio-economic every day. And the landscape has been so poorly managed outside the protected area that this little 3% is pretty much all that's left. And we can't guard that with guns and bombs. Okay, you're just going to create huge animosity. That boundary fence used to be the Gaza Strip. You know, that's how bad it was. And we literally had seismic detectors, drones, the works protecting that boundary. That is not sustainable. You can ask anyone. Your money will run out for, you know, if nothing else. And whilst you're defending that, all our alien invasive ecology work, all our research work, water holes were failing, everything. So the landscape inside the park is just becoming more and more compromised because you're putting all your resources into trying to defend it against cattle grazing, because we had a 4-year drought and there was nowhere to graze those cows. You know, so I can't remember what the question was. Why women? So women, multi-generational. I need to invest in young women now that are going to become mothers, that will eventually become the grandmothers. And especially in a tribal context where the grandmother is sitting at home looking after the children of her children so that her children are freed up to go and work. I need them to be spreading the word. I need them to become the role models. I need them to be managing the money in the household as well. Now, to make sure the money is going to the appropriate places. They need... You can't run this show if you're just targeting one generation. I'm going to be very controversial now and say, in my context here, an investment into the men is short-lived. It's a frivolous, live for the day kind of mentality. And I apologize to all of my colleagues. They're literally sitting behind me. I'm so scared they're going to bang me over the head with a pot or something. But it is the reality. You're making a short-term investment, and their values lie in flashy cars, nice gadgets, cool stuff. Whereas the women are thinking, how can I put my kids through the best school? Or, you know, I don't want them to go to school with a shitty pair of shoes on, and, you know, these kind of things. That's where the values are.
Because men are so arrogant, as you said earlier.
Yeah, we are.
All right. Next question is from Carlos Portillo. There are 36 members. What's your target number of Black Mamba members for the best impact?
Best impact. That is a fantastic question. So the bigger the number, the bigger the impact. So it is a bit of a numbers game. That is true. The sad reality is that we rely almost 100% on donor funding. We get 30% of our funding through a government subsidy that stopped suddenly last year, August, because of COVID-19 and various other things. And we found ourselves in the poo. We've managed to keep it going thanks to our partners and so on. But this camp that I'm sitting in now, by the way, is our biggest revenue spinner. So we established this camp so that volunteers and interns could come through, and that money helps to pay for the other expenses. But the reality is that if I can't have 136 Mambas, I'm going to be sitting with that long lag period to achieve our objectives. I need to live for 120 years if I've only got 36 Mambas. But if I had 136 Mambas, I only have to live for 80 years. I'm 2/3 there already. So I want 100, and I don't want them just in the South African context either. They need to be spread out all over the world. Who's next?
Okay. Sorry, Stuart, do you have a do you have a pressing, we've got a bunch of questions on the comment section, but do you have a,
Sorry.
one? No, you're good.
Sorry, I don't mean to interrupt, but I am curious about one thing. Going back towards the training stuff that you mentioned earlier, Craig. You and I have both done military training, so I'm wondering, like, if maybe you could give us like a brief run through of what exactly what kind of training do the women you recruit go through to qualify to be a Black Mamba? Like, what kind of physical training? What do they learn about? Like, do they learn about the different kind of poacher traps they have to look out for? Like, what do they do? What is the training regimen? How long does it go for?
It's also a very good question. So when we interview, and we interview with the tribal chief and his council, they help us throughout the interview process and the selection process and even the employment process. So it's critical that the chief buys into every step of the way. The interesting thing about the women in the tribal context here is when they say, oh no, I don't think I can deal with the hardships of the physical training. I have to point out to them, but hang on a minute, you're collecting your water at the river. That's 5 kilometers from the nearest house in your village. It's 20 liters on each arm and 20 liters on the head. Plus you've got a baby on your back, and then on the way back you have to collect firewood as well. It's 46 degrees Celsius out there. I put it to you that you are already doing the PT every single day. Okay, you are tough. No, and they're like, how do we, but I can't deal with the wild animals. What? You're going down to the river at nighttime with these hippos and crocodiles and what have you, and the monkeys are stealing your food and everything. You've already got that in you. So it's easy. And because there's a kind of strong mental strength, there we go, tautology for you right there. The women are much stronger because they have to deal with so many things, so many hardships and what have you, that it's easy to put them through that physical training. And having said that, we were making a very big mistake if we expect a young woman to lift a Land Rover tire above their head. Okay, and I don't expect that of them. They can do everything else. They can run the distance. They can carry their heavy backpacks. They can live out in the bush on their survival training. So they go through survival training. It's 5 days in the bush. They go through their physical training on the usual PT courses, climbing the ropes and, every morning up and then flicking the big old tractor tires around and carrying the poles and all that kind of thing. They can do that. But we want them to work as a team. So the teams are very important. A minimum group entrance requirement or whatever is 10. So we want those 10 people to carry that very heavy pole together. We want those 10 people to get over that obstacle together. We want those 10 people to finish the 20-kilometer run together every day, and so on and so on. So it's important to build that kind of team spirit, if that makes any sense.
Teamwork makes the dream work.
Absolutely. And then we take them. So before they go to the service provider, we have to prepare them. And so I'll have them for a few weeks beforehand. And only when I'm satisfied that they can do push-ups and sit-ups and burpees and squats and all that kind of thing, then we will send them to the military training camp. Because I don't want a dropout rate. It costs us a lot to invest into a Mamba. Then once they come out of that, then they do their survival training, their first aid training, their what constitutes a poacher, arrest and search and seizure procedures, court procedures, how to handle evidence, all that kind of stuff then happens after that training. And then they get deployed with the old Mambas for another few months until the old Mambas come to me and say, hey, these guys are now sharp and they can perform on their own. Then they'll get their badges and they can put them on their uniforms and they go. But throughout the entire career, there's training. So, some of them have been dog handler training, 6-month courses under their belts, 4x4 driving courses, and you'll see every badge obviously denotes a different status, and that's the incentives that they get. So you get your basic salary as a Black Mamba, entry-level salary, and then for every stripe or badge you get paid an incentive for that. So those are my first 8 officers in the team. That's an extra $500 a month. If you're a sergeant, it's another 1,000 Rand a month, so on and so on and so on. So a Mamba that's been with me for 8 years or 9 years now could be walking home with 12,000 something Rand, which is a super, super competitive salary in this arena. You won't get that anywhere else. to do that job. The reason why we built those incentives in, obviously for the whole definition of the word incentive, but also because if I want to punish someone, if they damage the vehicle or they lose the equipment or, the cameras or whatever, I don't want to touch that basic salary because I know that's feeding 8 or 9 people back home. But I can say, I'm taking your driver's allowance away now. Thank you very much. You're very naughty with my vehicle. So those incentives. Anyway, and there's a rank structure and la la la. But it hits a ceiling. You can't have everybody as a sergeant, and you can't have everybody as a first aid officer, and everybody as a driver, and so on. So we've got to be inventive and come up with these bizarre strategies to come up with new training courses. Media has become a big thing for us. So now we've got a media course, and now you must get your media badge, and then you get extra money because now you must talk to the media. Who would have thought that there's a thing, in a military environment to deal with the bloody media? But yet here we sit dealing with the media.
All right, next question. And John, let me know if we're running out of time on your Zoom account or anything. And I know Craig is probably getting kind of late for you, so let me know if we're running you too late.
What, we haven't even started. The rum is only open now. I'm joking.
John, do we have a time limit here?
No, I think we're all good on my end. I think it's something.
Okay. I think we've got a couple more questions there in the chat. Carrie McGrath asks, did you find any of the mambas or the bush babies had fear of the animals, be it from crossing the river or them coming into their communities? And is the work you're doing changing that mindset as well as wanting to protect them?
Absolutely. That's another very good question. So yeah, hi Kerry, nice question, and thanks for that. So when the mambas come to the landscape, part of their training has got to be how to interact with wild animals, especially because you're not armed, and that's another one of my reasons for not arming people. I haven't seen a researcher. You can ask, a lot of them are sitting online here now. Okay, do you go into the bush to research your big lions and elephants and everything with a gun? No. Chris, you've been driving around this landscape all over the show, getting out of the car and stumbling around in the bush, getting caught in spider webs, etc. Nobody needs a gun. I can't believe that we co-evolved with these animals on this landscape and still put somebody on the moon, okay, without guns. And now suddenly we need guns to live amongst wild animals. I'm living in an open camp. These guys know that have been here. The animals walk through here willy-nilly all over the show. There's not a single firearm in this camp. And long may it last. It's about the training. It's about reading the animal's behavior. The minute I put a weapon in that lady's hands, she's walking out there thinking, I can be braver because I'm carrying it. It works the same as traditional medicine. They wear a lot of things to protect them against crocodiles and all kinds of things. It's all hocus pocus. However, the placebo, they think it's going to work. And when you've got a gun, it's the juxtaposition of that. So I can't actually even remember why I started this conversation. What was the question was?
The question was, have the Black Mambas and also
Yes.
the part of the educational program been emboldened? Yeah.
It's critical, and they have to do that regularly. But now they're in a position where they can actually teach people. And Barbara is online now, and through her contacts, we have been fortunate enough to be able to send Mambas on the highest game ranger qualification that you would get from if you wanted to be a guide at a lodge to take people on game walks and so on and so on. It's a very, very expensive course. It's 90,000 Rand per person. And we have Mambas currently on that course now. So they will come out with those certificates. It also makes them more marketable if they wanted to leave the Mamba arena. But I put it to you that they will be telling those people on that course how to perform amongst wild animals. There's another secret that the African people use. Us strange pale faces come here and we say, first of all, I need a gun, and second of all, I must sneak around in the bush, sneaky, because I want to see how freaking close I can get to the animal or whatever it might be. The African way is make as much noise as possible and make sure the animal is aware that you're approaching, so you don't surprise it and it turns around and immediately the amygdala is triggered and it wants to take you out. So they make so much noise and they're jabbering away on the walkie-talkie and so on. And that's our objective. Our objective is to advertise our presence. It's visual policing. We're not sneaking around in the bush, and it works both for the poachers and for the wild animals. I say that, but yes, they've been chased around, and yes, we've had to go and retrieve them, in a vehicle and what have you. In the buffalo herd is like 250 buffalo, and there's 2 mambas standing in the middle of them, and that sort of thing. It's dangerous, and it's one of the the hazards of the job, but they understand. And if you understand something and you've been trained in it, you can appreciate it even more. And you can go back to your friends and family back at home, and you can explain when you hear a hyena at nighttime, they can say, hey, that's a hyena. That's a female hyena. And that's a territorial display. She's just advertising her presence. Don't worry about it. And they'll go, how the hell do you know that? I say, I'm a black mamba. I know everything.
Okay,
great.
so Rachel has 2 questions. She asks, how many days is the initial training? And the women have experienced growth and self-esteem. What promotional opportunities do they have within the unit?
Yeah, it's a sad one. So the initial training for a black mamba, they're first with me for up to 2 weeks, maybe even more. And then after that, they go for another 90 days of training before they are deployed on the landscape. It's a long, long process. There's a fascinating part about employing women from the local tribal community, and that is they don't even ever in their upbringing get access to things like walkie-talkie toys, watching TV where you can see the cops on TV, you know, these programs where it's copy 10-4, you know, all this kind of thing. They don't even know how to hold a walkie-talkie. They don't even understand how to push the button to transmit or flick a channel or whatever. So it's a long, long process. Navigation, giving GPS coordinates, documenting information that they see, this footprint, how to take a photograph of a footprint of a poacher so we can match it up with a database, what the difference is between a heavy caliber rifle and a light caliber rifle. You know, there's so many subtle nuances. The training is, wow. You know, the fitness is the easiest part of the training, the absolute easiest part, and the shortest part of their training, because they get fit really fast because they arrive fit to start off with. There's no cars in their community. They walk everywhere anyway, and they're carrying heavy weights. But it's all those little things that you don't realize. The men come in immediately knowing how to work a walkie-talkie. They know immediately how to work, you know, equipment and that, because they watch the TV shows, and you can see it immediately that they're picking this up from TV because it's all American speak. Copy 10-4, yeah, big buddy, standing by, you know, Romeo, Foxtrot, Oscar 1, you know, that kind of thing. So you can say, hey, you'll be watching TV, whilst the ladies have been slaving at the fire, cooking your bloody food. So when I employ them, they don't know which way is up and down. They think it's a cell phone. They turn it on and they look for the buttons to push to make a phone call. And then if you call them and say, where are you? I'm over here. I'm over here. So where the hell? I don't know where over here is. You must tell me, you know, give me a GPS coordinate. Oh God, but you can see me. No, I can't. I'm on the other side of the bloody planet. You know, so it's hilarious, and we have great fun during that training. They have to learn the phonetic alphabet from A to B. The men come in, they already know it because they've been watching TV. You know, say, read that number plate to me. Juliet Foxtrot Mike. Just like that, the men. You know, say, wow, you guys watch a lot of whatever those shows are. And we don't have TV, so we have no idea. You know, but the ladies come in and you have to teach them even the phonetic alphabet. And we'll sit on the side of the road, and every number plate that comes past on a car, they must call it out until they've got the phonetic alphabet correct, their observation skills for those kind of things, whatever. Does that make sense? Eh? So it's a long training course. And the nice thing is that because I've got 3 intakes of mambas now, once they've done their basics with us, I can deploy them with those mambas, and then the mambas take them by the hand and teach most of the stuff to them in situ, in the field, on the job training. And then they will tell me, those sergeants in those teams, they will tell me, these guys are now ready for deployment. This one's good, that one's better, you know, so on and so on.
And is that how they're able to move up in positions? Is basically moving into different units? Okay.
That is correct. We have a, so everything is about training. So if they want to be, people will apply. Now, just like these guys that are on this really expensive game ranger training course now, everybody has an equal opportunity to apply. The sergeants will then recommend who they think is the best. So it's semi sort of quasi-democratic, you know, and then I'll make the final call. So then it becomes autocratic at the end of it. And I've only got space for, let's say, 2 on that training course. So I've only got space for 2 sergeants or whatever. It's got to be the best person for the job. You don't get a medal here for entering the race. You get a medal for winning the race. It's different to the rest of the world. Yeah, it's same as it was in our time. But anyway, so but there's those incentives, and it's really important that we prepare them for a life outside the Black Mamba arena. So they have to have a file, a personnel file with a lot of certificates that makes them marketable. Computer skills, Microsoft Excel, spreadsheets, they can type letters, they know how to use email, they can track things, they can drive vehicles, they've got all the licenses and the permits and the registrations and the accredited training in a file. So they can market themselves. Even outside of the security arena, they're going to enter into a business or whatever. Plus, we have to be really clever in coming up with new little things. So the next step for us, because we have our own training course now and obstacle courses and everything, is those Mambas that have a panache for exercise, for example, then they will become PT instructors. And then they'll get another badge and another 500 Rand on top of their salary. And they'll be PT instructors. So but that's my staff in the senior, at the top of that pyramid. We have to come up with these clever little ideas all the time. So next month it's PT, then we need trauma first aid, because we've got normal first aid. But what happens if somebody falls? Children, that was the other thing. We're dealing with 1,300 kids. What happens if one of them falls off the back of a donkey cart and bangs his head on the rocks? Our first aid is probably not suitable for that. So we had to get people, the specialists came in, and we now there's got people with pediatric first aid badges, and so we build it up.
All right. Daniel Mueller asked, has COVID-19 had an adverse effect on the Black Mambas funding?
Very much so. We lost probably 90% of our funding. Daniel, what's significant though is, we made some bad decisions because we didn't predict that COVID was going to come along. I'm not sure anybody could have. Not even Nostradamus figured that one out. So, we made a big investment in the Mambas farm. We call it the Mambas farm. It's the Mambas headquarters. It's where they're based. They have their own workshops for their own vehicles, and everything is self-sufficient. And we thought we were doing them a favor. Don't smoke, by the way, people. It's bad for your health. But if we had kept that money, that was our war chest to see us through times like this. And then we suddenly found ourselves without that. And we thought, luckily, we've still got the government subsidy, so the basic salaries will carry us through. Then the government said, oh, no, you need to be an essential service. We can't do without you. You have to work during COVID. You can't go home. So now I sat with overtime bills and things as well. And I thought, well, we could. And then they said, no, we're stopping your subsidy. Not just for us, but for all the government conservation projects and what have you. You call it the Extended Public Works Program. That everybody lost their funding. Boom, just on an email. Ching, gone. The same day we got the email, that was it. We hereby inform you, regretfully, blah, blah, blah. So we were hit really hard. My staff in the camp here, they lived for a year with all the senior management and the researchers and everything. Fuel was rationed. We stockpiled fuel. We stockpiled staff rations to keep them going. And we had to become incredibly inventive. Building our own things in workshops, repairing things on the fly, swapping spare parts around. I haven't seen my own personal Land Rover for so long now because it's dead. And it's been half parts. It's an organ donor now, to keep the other vehicles going. You go onto scrap heaps, you can find old tires that other people have thrown away, and you put them onto a vehicle because it's still got 2,000 kilometers maybe left on the tread. That's how we've survived. And I'm very proud to say that my staff have been so inventive, and they've really managed to evolve. If it wasn't for these hardships like COVID that we go through now, we would never evolve. You get stuck in a rut, and it's just every day is the same kind of thing. So I believe that COVID has actually been good for us in that respect. When we come out of COVID, we're going to be 10 times stronger than when we went in. The farm has developed, it's growing things. We've sold our radio antenna masty thing that blew over in the wind for our radio network. Now has every other service provider on it, and they're all paying us rent to have their little antenna on that thing to give cell phone coverage or whatever they use it for. I don't know. But that's so things that I never thought of in my life before. Staff have come to me and said, hey, you must try this, you must do that, you must phone this person, you must figure that out, and la la la. Oh, okay. Solar power. Who would have thought that my ancient old 20-year-old solar panels would be running this entire conversation that we're having tonight? And I just used it for LED lights so I could see what I'm drinking. So we've really come out of the box. It's insane. Fuel rations, 20 liters of fuel per Mamba team per week. Whereas in the past, I just drive around. So it wasn't that loose, but we've really had to streamline things, and it's worked out beautifully. It's discipline. So Daniel, it was a very good question. We've had some incredible partners there, and what's even more significant is those Mambas that work in the communities with the kids every day. They identified 90 families that were on death's doorstep because of COVID-19. They literally had nothing. They didn't even have water, let alone food, and so on. They identified those 90 families, and the Mambas take them boxes of food. It's a set menu every week. No, it's every fortnight. And then every week they visit them to make sure they've got water, and they carry water to them. It's a full regalia, full uniform in their official vehicles and what have you. They're driving into those communities, and they're going to those grannies looking after those kids, and they're saying, here's your food parcel, here's your seeds to grow your own vegetables, etc. And here is 150 liters of water to see you through until we visit you again. We can do that despite COVID. And that has boosted the Mambas profile so much. We've actually benefited from COVID. Even though we're poorer than a church mouse right now, we have benefited from COVID because it's boosted our model through the roof.
So tied on to that, Gad Perry asked, do you know if you are getting any assistance from the U.S. Department of State or any of your programs part of that?
No, it's we're really bad at raising money. So we haven't applied, let's put it that way. We've got a number of really great partners, but unfortunately we put all of our eggs into the wildlife economy basket. So our partners are, for example, zoos overseas that have iconic African animals, and we approached them and said, you can't keep the animals in captivity unless they are ambassadors for their own kind out in the field. And there's a bit of revenue stream coming through that. And we were like, yeah, this is very nice. But then suddenly the zoos closed down, and they were in like a really difficult situation as well. We have some corporate investors as well that help us out a lot. And then, some of you guys are online now. And I look at Barbara over there, and she is the reason why I can sit here and drink rum tonight. I'm joking, Barbara. Your money went to the right place, I promise you. So, so we've got some people that are really good to us and really believe in us. Are great partners. I'm trying to think. Helping rhinos. Rhino Mercy in Seattle, for example. Dr. Tom Tochterman, one of my directors, in fact, the universities. Some of the universities that do the study abroad programs are quite happy to say, keep the money and we will come whenever COVID has sorted itself out. So you don't have to pay it back and whatever. So we've got great people out there. Without the people, we would be dead as a doornail.
So Victoria Craddock asks, would that academy be tailored to the area they're in? And I believe, tell me, Victoria, if I'm wrong, but you're talking about the Black Mambas Training Academy?
That is correct. It's not going to be area or region specific. It's going to be any woman that wants to enter the wildlife security arena or national park security or whatever, whether you're in Bolivia or Indonesia, and we've been all over the world talking to their governments and so on about this program. Send them to us, and we can even send Mambas to you, and you will walk out with the best possible anti-poaching ranger or security ranger, whatever you want to call it. We'll make sure of that. So it's not Africa specific, but I do believe they should interact with the Mambas. I think the Mambas should be the primary trainers. I've got some fantastic Mambas. Those of you that know them, there's Leita and Felicia and Colette and what, I mean, I can list them off, and they would love to train other women to do the job.
Martin, I'm sorry, I'm probably going to mispronounce your last name, Grishwind, asks, how well known and appreciated are the Black Mambas in South Africa? You think they are able to change not only their villages, but also the other areas?
Yeah, there's that's a very good question. That was a big lag for the South Africans to catch up. My biggest battle in this was to actually get the old school conservation managers to accept the model. So we still get a lot of resistance from the old school guys, the old militarized approach to protecting a national park. But the South African government bought into this thing lock, stock, and two smoking barrels. It was incredible how, the Mambas have been asked to speak at major political events, and they've been mentioned in the presidential speeches by a number of presidents. We honor, I don't know how many presidents we've had in the time that the Mambas have been around, but quite a few. You get two kinds of African countries. You get those where the same president's face is on the dollar bill for the last 100 years because he just refuses to step down. And in a country like ours where you have a different president every time you look. So, it's they're very, very well received. They've been on national TV many, many times. They've been in the local media, the local press. Oh, almost every day, I would say. There's something about the Mambas somewhere on this landscape. It's insane. It's great because it boosts their profile in their communities as well. Even in the Vogue magazine, doll, I tell you, there's no accounting for class. Okay, they're even in the Vogue.
All right. By the way, you should read through these comments, Craig. There's a lot of compliments and encouragements. I'm just kind of skipping over those and just reading the questions. But Victoria Craddock asks again, hi all, I've met and spent time with 4 of your mamas recently, been blown away by their confidence and retention of individuality. What has been the best tool in equipping these women and unlocking potential? Could it be effective in spheres broader than the anti-poaching unit?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Fantastic. Yeah, nice to have you online as well. I think yeah, you probably didn't see me with all these clothes on either when you were here last, but the significance is the individuality. We're not here to create drones. It's a little different, Stuart, to the military model where once you finish with your training and we've got you to that level, we expect your personality traits to come out and we celebrate your different personality traits. That's what makes the Mambas unique to everybody else. There's a sisterhood amongst them that's incredibly strong. For the anthropologists out there, there might be a little bit of McClintock syndrome going on there as well in the compound, but the individuality, the fact that we've allowed their personality traits to manifest and we don't suppress, we don't say, hey, that's not appropriate, I'm terribly sorry, that's not in the standard operational procedure manual. Okay, the SOP says this, and you will behave like that, and so on. So we celebrate your individuality, we celebrate the values that you bring to this organization, and we will recognize that, and if necessary, we will find a niche for you, even in this institution, by developing a new program or a new angle, and so on. We don't want a high turnover of Mambas. We want the same Mambas to be with us until retirement, because that's the investment that you make. It's a long-term investment, then you're only going to reap the rewards much later down the line. I'm very proud, the people that meet the Mambas now, so they'll sometimes come and sit around the fire with us here in camp. Is the fire still going? Where's the fire? The fire's dead. You won't believe the difference in the personalities from when they arrived here for the training, where they were too scared to tell you their name. If you say, give me your name, soldier. What's your name? They were so nervous to be alive because they were never allowed to express themselves in their own community culturally. But now they go home and they say, hey, husband of mine, I spent the entire day collecting that firewood and you're just burning it all up now to sit and socialize. Who's going to collect the firewood tomorrow? I'm on duty tomorrow. Who's bringing the money into this household? Who paid for that chair you're sitting on? So it's changed things. Everybody wants Black Mambas now. It's incredible. Who's next?
Daniel Mueller asks, will South Africa's economic development ever reach the state that bushmeat poaching / subsistence poaching will no longer be necessary? Is there a projected year in the future for such a date, or will this be an eternal plight of the African continent? Only eventually the only animals left will be in zoos.
Daniel, you are hitting the nail on the head here. The sad reality is that there's a traditional use for wildlife products. And it would be very unfair of us, I think, to tell people that you can't use wildlife products for traditional uses. We are not here as the Spanish Inquisition, or whatever you want to call it, the Spanish conquistadors that are going to say my religion or my beliefs or my doctrine or dogma is better than yours. So we have to accept that we have our protected areas, and outside of the boundaries of those protected areas, animals are going to be harvested, or wildlife products are going to be harvested. One of the things that the Mambas are looking at right now during COVID, ironically, is the use of plants for traditional medicine because of COVID. And we're noticing that trees are being ring-barked and strip-barked, and the propagules, the reproductive organs of the plants, are being removed. And this could have adverse effects in the long run. But you know, who are we to say that that part of their culture must disappear and they must go and buy their food at a supermarket? It's not fair. I don't think we should, but I think we do have an opportunity to create a buffer around our protected areas to say sustainable harvesting, and that's an educational thing that we have to research and say what is sustainable. And then we must embark, we must use our bush babies. We've got 1,300 kids. If we can say to them, when you strip the bark off that animal, you have to not the bark off an animal. If you strip the bark off a tree, then you can only do it for this amount, and then it must heal, and you must go to another tree, and then you can revisit that tree a year later, or whatever it is. You know, that's the kind of information that we must gather and impart upon our bush babies. You're not trying to teach them that that is a knobthorn, which is an acacia nigrescens, and it only grows under these soil conditions, and la la. That's not what we're teaching them in the classroom. Sustainable harvesting is always going to be a thing. You know, we are hypocrites. We say we don't believe in Chinese traditional medicine, yet half of us go for reflexology and what's that thing where they stick needles in you? There's a thing, acupuncture, you know, or we drink chai tea and, you know, all that kind of thing. So we embrace certain parts of it that suit our lifestyles, but we don't allow the other things because it doesn't suit us. You know, we want to stop ivory trade, but there are people in Germany, in little schlosses somewhere, that it's been a tradition in their families for hundreds and hundreds of years to work ancient mammoth ivory into trinkets and sell them. And are we going to say, you must stop that traditional practice? You know, I don't want to be part of that. I'm an anthropologist. I won't be part of seeing somebody's culture disappear off the face of this earth because of somebody else's values. But at the same time, my primary objective is biodiversity conservation and animal welfare. So I can't watch an animal struggle in a snare, for example. That's an unsustainable harvesting method. It's an indiscriminate harvesting method. Their objective might be to catch meat, but an elephant could walk into the same snare and die a month later. You know, so we have a long way to go to get people on board. I don't believe in my lifetime that the bushmeat harvesting industry or the traditional harvesting industry will ever fizzle out. We celebrate tribalism in Africa, and you know, the tribal ethos says your chief has a leopard skin. A leopard must die for that, you know. But is it okay if the leopard is killed in a humane fashion and it was harvested, you know, after it spread its genetic material and it ran around happily on the landscape for 10 years and it was 1 foot in the grave? And you know, so these are questions we have to ask us. Really hard to be a white guy from Europe sitting here, because I'd like to say nobody touches anything. Okay, this is just a look no touch environment, but we have to be cognizant of the fact that there are tribal, cultural, historical angles to everything we must manage. But having said that, I have 3% of South Africa in the Kruger National Park. That is just look no touch environment there. Thank you very much. But if I'm successful inside my 3%, there will be enough on the outside. The 3% can only contain so much. It must leave and it must populate those buffer areas. It's not an easy question, Daniel. It's a good question. And you put me on the spot and I like it.
So G6 then asks, one aspect that I have wondered about is uniforms versus the removal of indigenous culture. The advantages of uniforms are many and obvious, but just as school uniforms remove signs of individuality and local culture, can women, especially since you bring up attractiveness, have a degree of freedom of appearance, hair, accessories, etc.?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Fantastic question, G6, whose name shall be withheld to protect the identity. That's a very, very good question. And I believe in celebrating the individuality of the people to such a degree. I expect to see them express themselves on parade when we have training courses and when I send them as ambassadors all over the show and what have you. I do not expect them to wear their uniforms. I expect them to express themselves. And I want to see tribal gear, you know, or whatever it is that they feel comfortable in. But for sure, on parades, you will notice that the Black Mambas hairstyles change on a whim. You know, they are great at that, and the earrings and the lipsticks. And in fact, Barbara knows, we have such a huge support base in Germany. It's incredible. And they get this steady stream of makeups and moisturizers and body butter and things that I've never heard of in my entire life before. All the women in my life are just wrinkled old prunes because they never get any of these nice things. But the Mambas, they also would never get those nice things, but they're women and they want to have nice skin and they want to have nice nails and they want to have beautiful earrings and nice lipsticks and, you know, decent hair and all that sort of thing. Some of them even go for, oh, I had a big, anyway, it's gone now. You know, they even go for massages. I mean, what the hell is that all about? But there's places here in town that offer massages, and they say, oh, no, and you'll see it on their social media. They say, I've got the full moon patrols coming up, so I'm just booking in for a hot rock massage. What the hell is this? You put a rock in the microwave oven and then you roll around on it, or what is this all about? But isn't that wonderful? It's so wonderful that somebody that was once collecting firewood and water and looking after a mud hut household is now going for a hot rock massage and appearing on TV with earrings and lipstick and fantastic hair, and they look beautiful. They look beautiful and they feel so confident because of it. And their husbands are so incredibly proud of them, and their children are proud of them. And the entire community is proud of them because they look great. The uniform, you know the benefits of the uniform. I don't have to tell you. But at the same time, I don't want to see a drone standing in a uniform. I hope I answered the question.
I believe so. So we have some folks asking about where they can donate, and we can provide some links afterwards if they want to help support some of the Black Mambas program or bush babies. Is it okay if we provide the link to the Transfrontier Africa webpage? And there's a
yeah.
Okay, is that the best?
Absolutely.
Place? Okay, so we'll provide that afterwards, folks. I think we're just about through all the questions. We have one from Emma Edwards. Do you have any intention of extending the Bush Babies education program to the UK?
Oh, man. Okay, so great that you asked that question. So one of our most, you know, it's so important that we bring the Mambas and the tribal community into the global community. You know, most of the NGO interventions around here have helped the communities to survive, but they've never really allowed them to flourish. We don't have enough industry in this country to provide for the 54 million unemployed people. So how do we integrate people into the global community? Once you're part of the global community, the norms and standards of a global community is like a coronavirus, you know, it spreads amongst everybody and so on. Otherwise, you're isolated in your little community and you collect your water there and you graze your cattle there, and you're born, you marry, you die in that community. Wi-Fi is critical. So there's an institution in the United Kingdom called How Many Elephants and Holly Budge, and they managed to raise enough money for us to put Wi-Fi live stream into the classrooms. So my little Mambas and their bush babies, not only can they go home now with this handheld telephony device-y thing, and Samsung has given every Black Mamba a telephone, and they can go home and they can show their families what it is that they saw on patrol. There's also cameras on my landscape that we use for security purposes. Wildlife Watch, for those of you that are not on it right now, wildlifewatch.com, go on it, you'll see my 4 cameras out there in the field. They're supposed to be helping for anti-poaching, but the biggest value is that it can bring the wildlife into your classroom, whether you're in the United Kingdom or whether you're in Peru. And you can design lesson plans and things about what animals come past, what sounds you hear at nighttime. You become a virtual ranger. It is absolutely fantastic. The Mambas are using it more than the people overseas. There's 90,000 people on that now as we speak, watching it around the globe. But the Mambas are taking it back home and they're showing their kids and their families and their peers what it is on their landscape. No longer do the educators that we employ in the Black Mamba project have to dress up as a rhino or an elephant and cut out a cardboard thing and run around on the stage to entertain kids. They just say, check the big fat screen on the thing over there. And the first person that sees an impala run past gets a sweetie, okay? And what sound was that you heard? And hey, what is that impala doing now? What's going on? You know, why is it jumping like that? Oh no, it must be avoiding a predator or whatever. So the value of using technology and bringing this in. And now the next step, to answer your question, is to connect with schools with FaceTime and sharing lessons and time with schools overseas. And yes, those kids are there even at night. Okay, so last night we had a wonderful using this technology. we showed them The Lion King. You know, so they all sit outside in a huge circle. It's a massive circle, and there's a data projector that beams, and it's in the middle of nowhere, and it beams onto this big screen that's actually just an old piece of material, and there's a big fire burning in the middle, and they're watching The Lion King, and they're screaming and they're crying, and every emotion. You know, we've all watched these Disney movies, you know, and we all know these characters and what have you, but they haven't. You know, you can go back to the Secret of Nim or the Rescuers and what have you, and show a thing like that, and just incite so many emotions amongst those kids. They jump up in their chairs and they scream and they run around because the big villain rat is coming or whatever. It's incredible. You guys don't understand how important it is to bring these people, my people, into the global arena. It's not good enough that they survive on cabbages and potatoes and bushmeat and they collect their water out of a river. They must flourish. They must be part of the global community. The bush babies must have their own Facebook page where they can post things and the kids can connect with schools overseas. And they can ask questions and you know, show and tell online, because they're never going to get there. And those kids overseas are never going to get here. You know, so let's use this technology. Let's make it happen. I need to convince Samsung, by the way, that this can't stop, because we only got 2 months funding out of them and it's running out. And I've got 90,000 people watching. They go, oh, look at the lovely elephant. I say, what are you, white? Yes. Okay, bye. You know, kind of thing. I mean, I love him, but it's, you know, it's so tiring. But it's, I need to connect with schools overseas. I need my kids in those classrooms to realize that they're not alone, that there's a bigger world. My Mambas have traveled the globe. They've been everywhere from New York City to London, you know, and they bring that back, but it's telling. They can't show it, but with Wi-Fi, and this is the biggest thing that any NGO has ever done for us, was this, I call it connecting tribes, because we're all tribal one way or another. But what's the next step? I'm just a humble anthropologist with a botany background. What do I know? You know, I need people that can manage this project. Valeria, I can see you online. You hear what I'm saying, because you've heard my rants many times. Let's get connected to classrooms overseas.
Fantastic. So Cash Buter, and I apologize, I'm sure I'm mispronouncing some people's names. I read about the Black Mambas in a major German newspaper. Do you think that private donation could play a bigger role in the future with more media attention?
Yes. Short question. I mean, a long question, short answer. The majority of our funding for the operational expenses, the daily expenses, actually comes from private donations. People that believe in us, people that you know, see the Mambas in a newspaper article somewhere or in an in-flight magazine, whatever. My job, and Valeria, you'll see Valeria van der Westhuizen over there. She's our media manager. She is working around the clock to keep the Mambas in the media, because that's how we, and you know, it's $5 here, it's $1 there, and so on, but that's what's keeping us alive, and that's what's boosting these Mambas profiles and what have you. Daniel, are you leaving us? You're waving at the,
yeah, I gotta go, but it's great
Cheers,
to hear
Daniel.
you, man. Great to hear your work. I wanted to ask
Likewise.
about your wish list for in the short term and the long term.
Yeah, no, thanks, Daniel. It was really good to see you again as well, eh?
Absolutely.
Thanks for hooking up with us.
Absolutely. I'll do it again soon.
Cheers, man.
Cheers.
Daniel is a very well published author, by the way. It's actually a huge accolade that he's hooked up to listen to our rantings tonight. But the media plays a critical role. Valeria, are you listening? I know I always rant about the media and I throw them off the landscape if they're not nice, etc. But the media plays a critical role in reaching our objectives, not just for fundraising, but the boosting of the Mambas profiles in their communities. If they weren't recognized internationally, regularly as well, they wouldn't have bragging points in their community. They couldn't go home and say to their kids, hey man, look at me. This is me in the Vogue magazine. This is me in the in-flight magazine of British Airways. You know, this is me in the local newspaper. This, you know, I work for these guys. La, 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 la. The media plays a critical role. The revenue stream from the media is not great, but the profile of the Mambas, it also gives us the upper hand when we have a lot of followers on, let's say, Facebook or whatever the other things are. you know, we fight on a number of different fronts. We fight trophy hunting that's unsustainable. You know, and we fight it all under the Black Mamba banner. We fight unsustainable developments on the landscape. That guy wants to increase his lodge from 24 beds to 56 bed nights. We say, no, there's not enough groundwater. How do you know? I say, well, you know, the Black Mambas are not going to stand for it, kind of thing. And they're nervous to do anything out of the box because the Black Mambas have got such a massive international following. So we have to keep that going. Gives us our power is actually in our followers. It's not just the revenue. The revenue, of course, is critical as well, but it's our power. You know, if I'm sitting with Leita, my senior sergeant, and people are talking about trophy hunting on the landscape or whatever, I say, I'm not going to answer that question. I'm going to hand it over to Leita. Let's hear what she has to say. And she says, how can you expect me and my team to patrol this landscape and stop our brothers and uncles from coming in here when tomorrow somebody from Texas is coming in to shoot the same elephant that we were sent to protect tonight? You know, like, what, does it make any sense to you? It doesn't make any sense to me. You know, so I said, I'm not saying that. And then people are too scared to do anything because they look on the Mambas website pagey thing and they've got like, I don't know, 500,000 million trillion followers. Or a Brazilian. I don't know how much a Brazilian is, but it used to be 50 Rand in town. Are there any matches?
That's fantastic. We've got still more questions coming in. So are you still good answering?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. All right. So Carrie McGrath asks, you mentioned full moons earlier being a big issue during poaching. Do you have extra patrols during those periods?
Yes. Yeah, thanks. That's a good question. During the full moon period, we pull all the Mambas. So the shifts have to overlap. And during full moon period, it's all hands on deck for 10 days. So the full moon, you know, it's 5 days before, 5 days after. It's all systems go. And, you know, the armed response, nobody's allowed to go home. It's, and we do change our patrol regimes. We have observation posts out there listening for gunshots, watching the landscape, etc. We have to keep the pressure on.
That makes sense. Lou V asks, you mentioned the husbands are proud. Are the Black Mamba's fathers proud?
Oh, yeah, I saw that come through. Thanks, Lou. That's really important. So what the bush babies decided, it's not good enough for us just to do the kids and the Mambas. So they have a thing called the bush grannies now as well. So the bush grannies and grandpas get put into the minibus that's broken now. But anyway, so we have to hire a minibus. And they get taken to all the cultural, you know, we're sitting in a landscape that used to be occupied by these tribal people. And it's, you know, during the apartheid regime, this was all allocated for various other things. And they come onto the landscape and they can see. And it would be so hard. You know, everybody was like, oh, you can't bring the people in here. Are you mad? They're going to say, oh, no, it's mine. And this is where I did that tribal thing, you know, in my time. And I want it back because it's a big land grab issue in South Africa. But they come in and say, that's my granddaughter, or that's my daughter that's protecting that. I'm still connected. I'm still bloody connected to this landscape. You know, the chief in the Maseki tribe right next door here said, I was circumcised on that hill as a child. Yeah, and now you protect it and I'm not allowed in and what have you. We now have a Maseki Mamba team that just looks after the Maseki tribal land, which is part of the national park and what have you. And they're like, yeah, now that's what I'm talking about. We were circumcised on that hill and my girls are looking after this place. You know, so they are very, very proud. It became competitive though, because the neighboring chiefs are saying, hey, where's my Mambas? How come that chief gets Mambas? I don't have Mambas. Where's my Mambas? And I'm saying, I don't have money for Mambas. But it steamrolls. You know, it blossomed so fast, and the buy-in from the men. We're not just changing the young women and their perceptions and what have you in the community. We're actually changing the men's perceptions as well, where they have to kind of tiptoe around their wives now, because the wives are the breadwinners. They are the primary breadwinners in those communities. They have to tiptoe around and say, is it okay if I take the car? You know, kind of thing. Is it okay if my friends come around this weekend? It's great. We even had to have a bit of marriage counseling here and there. Counseling is something that you would never consider in a tribal thing, but we've had marriage counselors come in.
All right, Daniel Mueller asks, my last question, Craig, and my last question, you ventured onto sustainability. I've been learning about sustainable development since I was in high school, early 2000s, and in my opinion, this term has become rather overused and commercialized. Would you say the Kruger National Park, in its current ecological, socio-ecological state, is a sustainable system? In short, is Kruger National Park a sustainable success story?
Wow. That's a heavy question. The answer is no. The Kruger National Park is not a sustainable ecological unit. It's not a sustainable financial unit, and it's not a sustainable political unit. Unless we get all those blocks ticked off, the Kruger National Park's days are numbered. That is the reality. There are coal deposits in the Kruger National Park that outcompete any coal mine. There are gold deposits in the Kruger National Park. There are mineral rights. Half of the Kruger National Park belongs to the tribal communities. 56% of it belongs to the tribal communities sitting on our borders, and they've been denied access for 100 years. You know, the ecological units are not sustainable. You know, the elephants are not even occupying 2/3 of the landscape that they should be occupying, because they are so shit scared of the landmines and the historical persecution in Mozambique and whatever it might be. And so we have a long, long way to go. The current economic model for the Kruger National Park is a government subsidy, and the rest is tourism. Tourism targets the Western ideal of dodging the gauntlet from the Johannesburg airport, the Oliver Tambo airport. You run the gauntlet, you come in through the gates of the Kruger National Park, and you can sigh and you know, and wind down your windows and relax, take your shirt off and start drinking your beer whilst you drive, kind of thing. That's what's keeping the Kruger Park going. It's not sustainable. The management interventions that are required on this landscape ecologically include periodic fires, bush clearing, culling, dehorning. You know, it's just endless. The human wildlife conflict issues are endless. We are failing in so many respects. The only way to address this is to bring those values across the border, so that we have sympathetic and patriotic, I call it environmental patriotism, so that the people of South Africa, not just the whites that make up a small percentage of a population, but that the actual voters in this country see the value. They don't have to love the wildlife, like I said before, but they must see the value in it. I don't love mines. I hate mines. I hate golf courses, but I see the value in them, you know? I mean, who the hell loves a golf course? What the hell? You hit the ball away, you spend the rest of the day looking for it, and when you find it, you hit it away again. You know, it's the stupidest game in the world. But having said that, and be that all as it may, it has a place. It creates jobs, it creates skills. It's a land use practice that can be defended under a certain set of circumstances. And we need the people of South Africa to agree on that. But we have to get buy-in from our tribal communities. And the Mambas at the moment, in my humble opinion, is the only defense against the fence. In an ideal world, that fence would come down. And then we wouldn't even have to patrol it. Maybe in 500 years' time, but yeah. The other thing is that we don't have enough industry in South Africa. You know, it's a kind of snatch and grab operation. It's mining operations, and it's you build a road, you employ a few people, the road's done, they go home, and now they've got nothing, you know. So we don't have industry. We don't have light industry. We don't have a way to create jobs. The Kruger National Park cannot provide jobs for everybody. It's impossible. It's also not enough impala and bushmeat out there to feed everybody. But it's the last Bastille. And unless, it's not just about building patriotism, but it's also creating alternatives. So we need, and you know, us white people, every time somebody says, hey, I'm going to start a orange grove farm, then all the white people say, oh, the environmental impact is really bad and it's going to suck too much water out of the ground. They say, okay, we won't do that. They say, okay, we're going to start fish farming. No, you're going to use alien species and they'll escape into the river and you can't do that and everything is going to, and they say, okay, we won't do that. You know, and my entire career here has just been people coming up with ideas and the environmental impact assessment squashing them. because we are maybe a little bit too fundamental and maybe even a little bit too altruistic in our approach. This is Africa. If we want that landscape to survive, we're going to have to give a little. And we can't just invest on the protected area landscape. We're going to have to invest off the landscape. We're going to have to, our researchers need to get out there and say, you know, the shade trees are disappearing. It's making that village so unpleasant to live in. They've got no shade. Their goats are going to die of exposure and desiccation or whatever the heck it is. You know, they've got no firewood to harvest. Blah, blah, blah. And if I project that on a graph, I can tell you now the only place they can harvest firewood and graze their goats is going to be inside the Kruger National Park. So should we not be rather investing there and changing minds and changing harvesting practices and maybe even planting? You know, I mean, here we plant trees and we wrap wire mesh around the trees to protect them from elephants and whatever. But we do nothing on the other side of the fence. I've known NGOs, I've been here this is my 15th year. And, you know, we have our little drinking parties every now and again. We always find an excuse to party here, by the way. And then they're like, oh, I know, I work for that NGO. And we put solar panels up in the communities. So, 14 years of putting solar panels in the communities, and I haven't seen a single solar panel. Has this become a lifestyle issue for you now? You know, or you're actually contributing? How do you measure your success? Where's your trophy hunters? Don't even get me started. I want to see one brass farthing going to paint a school or put a shoe on a child or something. Yet they're shooting millions of rands off this bloody landscape, and I haven't seen a single benefit from it to these local people. Seen a lot of fancy Land Cruisers driving around and vehicles that cost more than a house, you know, etc. But at the same time, I get into so much trouble for ranting about this, and I'm talking to a bunch of people from Texas. So yeah, but the reality is that if you want to defend your practice, then give me some evidence that it's actually helping.
All right, well, I think actually we reached the end of the questions that are in the chat anyway. I guess so. Final chance here. If anyone has a question that they want to voice, go ahead.
I do.
Let's do it.
Yeah, no, chock full of questions today. But actually, I had an idea, thought, Craig, jumping back towards what you were talking about with the Bush Baby program and how you're trying to like broaden the children's horizons on like, especially on a global perspective, how you put in like them watching like Disney movies on the big screen and all. Are you familiar with Disney nature films?
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely.
I watch those every year on Earth Day. In fact, last year they brought out 2 new ones, dolphins and elephants, and
Oh, wow.
They were really good. And I had this thought when I was working in Paraguay with the Peace Corps, to have the children watch those videos, because not only does it expose them more to wildlife, but it exposes them to wildlife on a global scale. Like you got animals in Africa, animals in the US, in Canada, in China, you know, all over the world. And like you said, you want these people to flourish, you know, these kids whose eyes you're trying to open up to the beauty of nature and wildlife. And you know, and you don't want them to be just like focused specifically on Africa. You want them to be wanting to work out like throughout the world. So like that could be something that you could include in the like films that you are presenting to them. You know what I mean?
Absolutely, 100%, Stuart, you're right. And that's something that we're hoping to achieve with the Samsung Wildlife Watch as well, is that they need to broaden this to polar bears, coral reefs, tropical forests, the works, so that we can beam this in. But having Wi-Fi in those classrooms means that we can access so much material on YouTube, on the Google machine, whatever it's called. I'm not very tech savvy, as you know. But, you know, that stuff, we can bring it straight in to the classroom And that's what we mean by making them global citizens, part of the global community. Is it's not just Africa, and you know what? South Africa is not the be all and the end all of wildlife. Let's be brutally honest here. You can go to Kenya and Botswana and Tanzania and all over the show, and you can see the big five. It's bloody marvelous. However, we want them to be proud of this that they've got in their backyard. But they must recognize penguins. I want them to see happy feet. You know, I want them to experience, I don't know what the other ones are. Finding Nemo, you know, for example. That's odd. And imagine if we had the cameras that we put up on our landscape here, you could just as well deploy them on a coral reef underwater. And you can stream it live into your classroom. You can put it in a forest in Borneo, and you can watch the orangutans bouncing around all over the show.
I even watch Shark Week every year. Like, cause
Yeah.
like, and also like, I don't know if you know about this, but I'm sure you've heard of Disney Plus, yeah?
Yeah, okay. I know of.
Disney Plus, it not only does it show like have an entire selection of Disney movies, but it also has an entire selection of shows and movies shown on National Geographic, such as the Disney nature films, along with a bunch of stuff you see on National Geographic or Animal Planet, you know?
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, it costs money to pay for that, but what I'm saying is that to be something to consider for the future, because it provides you an entire library of resources that are age appropriate for these children to help expose them to global wildlife nature.
Absolutely. And you know, there's another angle to this as well. Imagine the people that are visiting the zoos that we partner with. And I know there's many other zoos out there in the world, and they're coming and they're seeing a sad old elephant standing there or whatever it might be in an enclosure. But imagine if there was a big screen with a live feed from the African landscape where they can see that animal's cousins, aunties and uncles or whatever on screen. Alive. So it's not just about the kids, but it's also about awakening the adults' minds that are looking after the kids, that are saying to their children, this is all, I'm going to show you that elephant, but I want you to watch that screen. And that's what that elephant should be doing. And that's how that lion should be performing, you know, and so on. But yeah, Disney and Pixar and, you know, the animations, they can get away with a lot more than National Geographic and whatever, because they can anthropomorphize the animals much easier and make it really cool for kids. To say, there's Simba, it's Pumbaa. You know, when they look on the screen, they don't say there's a warthog. They say, it's Pumbaa. Yeah, they don't say, there's a meerkat. It's Timon. You know, on the screen. The impact of Hollywood or whatever the movie industry is huge. Mowgli, you know, is a huge hit. I can't remember the names of the other ones, but anyway,
Like
you're absolutely
Tarzan.
spot on. To have that access in the classrooms, you know, we've had it, we've grown up with it, we know these things, you know. But you know, when you take a broom and or a stick and you squash the mouse that's running across the floor, because that's what you've been taught. Now you watch The Rescuers and the kids are like, no, don't kill it, don't kill it, don't kill it. You know, it's really an important part of our change in values is watching those movies through our childhood. And the people in my context have never had access to that, and now we can give them access to that. And long may it last.
Yeah, no, and like a lot of people fail to realize the lessons that even though these are like movies primarily aimed towards children, they also have valuable lessons for both children and adults. Not just about nature and all, but also about life as well.
Yeah, no, it's very true. It's very, very true. There's a certain double-edged sword to anthropomorphizing animals, though. But I think at that age group, I think it's important. You know, if we want to achieve our goals, you know, let's anthropomorphize the hell out of these things. You know, to make people say, "Oh, look at that cute little lion," and that's Simba, and so on and so on. So as a scientist, I'll tell you now, anthropomorphizing animals is taboo, but, you know, for the purposes of education and building up an ethos and a value, bring it on.
But yeah, especially those Disney nature films, I highly recommend like showing those to the children, because I really think those would be very beneficial towards the Bush Baby program.
I agree, 100%. 100%.
All right. Do you have any other questions or anything else that people are curious about?
Well, not really a question, but I just wanted to say, you know, this was a great presentation, right? So, you know, the information that you're giving people is like invaluable. And you know, I miss you. So it's really good to see and hear your voice, and I'll be there soon. So you know,
Thank you very much, Chris. You've been an important member of our family for many, many years now, and it's really been a shame that COVID has kept you from your research facility, but it's still there, cobwebs and all.
Good.
Looking forward to having you back in the bush, man.
But yeah, no, you killed it. You nailed the presentation. So thanks for sharing.
Chris.
I'm glad I could hop on.
Awesome. You know, half of it was Craig Spencer, the other half was Captain Morgan. But between the two of us, we worked it.
Well, thank you everyone for coming. If that's the last of the questions, thank you, Craig Spencer, so much for your
Sorry,
time.
can I quickly jump in if that's okay as a last?
Yeah, go for it, Claire.
I myself am quite interested in being involved in anti-poaching, and one of my biggest questions recently is like how I'm going to do it. So first of all, thanks for saying we will be setting up like a global sort of academy, like you said, training women around the world, because it's something that I can't find, like you said, anywhere for the opportunity to do that. So yeah, I want to say thanks for that, and thanks for all the information and stuff that you've given. And I just wanted to know what big advice you would give to someone that would want to be, I guess, in your position in 10, 15 years time. And I guess maybe what are your biggest tips that you've encountered along the way?
Thanks, Clara. It's wow, you've got to have a thick skin, I suppose, is the one thing. You've got to really have a vision and a mission, and just don't allow anybody to deviate from that. So, you know, we have a lot of partners. A lot of our partners have dubious intentions, and you know, the Mambas might be poorer for it, but we will say, no, I'm terribly sorry, but we can't actually persist with this partnership just because of our values and what we stand for. So we've had to distance ourselves from a number of different partnerships, including the one in Zimbabwe, unfortunately, because they've armed those women and they've shaved their heads and they've forced them to become vegan. And as much as I support the vegan movement, in a tribal context, that's very rude to say to somebody, your once a week protein input, if you want to work for me, you have to follow my Western rules. You know, and you must carry a gun. And when you go home, you've got a shaven head and you're a soldier now. You're no longer a woman, you're a soldier. You know, so we've had to distance ourselves from a number of the mines on our boundaries have offered us vast sums of money. Safari Club International has offered us vast sums of money to partner with them if we would allow trophy hunting, and they could use the Black Mamba brand, whatever. But our values don't allow that. So you've got to decide what it is that you're trying to achieve. And, you know, I've got PhDs working for me. They're working with me, partnering with me, that haven't earned a salary in more than, well, since I've been here. But they persist. As long as we have volunteers coming through this camp, we have food and fuel, and somebody pours me a drink every now and again, and we're wearing the same old clothes that we had for the last 100 years. And we live on the faint hope that that's going to change at some stage. You know, maybe it will, maybe it won't. I don't know. But you've got to be, and it's about sacrifice. You're going to make friends on the one hand, but you're going to lose a lot of friends on the other hand. If you believe in your mission, you've got to stay on the, I don't know how to explain it without sounding biblical, but you must stick to that path. Do not deviate from that path. Unless it's in the best interests of your long-term goal. You know, you might go and dabble a little bit over there to swindle those people to get them back onto your path, to hold your hand. But the main thing is, there's your vision. This is your path that you need to walk to get there, and make the sacrifices. It's shitty out here, man. You know, we don't have running water half of the time because the elephants pull the pipes out. We don't have electricity if the sun doesn't shine. It's just, there's no hot water. What is that? You know, and the cars are old and falling apart at the seams. Literally, the mice eat. to make a nest in there. But I can't shake the mice out because they got babies, you know. So I think, oh my God, I can't actually I must have this mouse living in my home now. So it's there to stay. I got a squirrel that we've inherited because it just arrived and it was a baby and we've nurtured it, and the thing is just a maniac. And you know, if we wanted working dogs, we've got working dogs. It means because nobody else can look after the working dog. It's another sacrifice that we had to make. I can't abandon the thing. He's sitting right here next to me as we speak, you know, but he's my responsibility now, and so on. So these are, but if you believe in what you're trying to achieve, and there's no business ethics in what we do. So if somebody comes here with a business model, I say, but I can't say, you know, an elephant is a valuable species. So to spend 35,000 Rand on veterinary bills, helicopters and darting and what have you to remove that snail off that elephant is a valuable investment. But an impala tomorrow is a very common antelope, and therefore I can't justify spending the money on that. My mambas have called it in. They found it. They want me to save it. I must save it. I must spend the same amount of money on an impala as I don't have the money. So you must just make it work. But a business model will say, hang on a minute, that elephant is worth so much. It's going to live for so long. It's an asset, blah, blah, blah. Spend the money there, but shoot the impala. A bullet costs 5 Rand. Yeah, you know, it's a bad example, but it's a real example. It happens all the time here. You can't choose. You either stand for something or you don't. There's no muddied waters here. I'm not answering your question because I literally don't know. But the interesting thing is that you will find that you will build up such a huge support base at the end of the day if you stand for something that you firmly believe in. Look at Margaret Thatcher. Margaret Thatcher is still famous. She's been dead for 100 years. What the hell, man? You know, but she stood for something that was that she believed in, bigger than herself.
No, you answered my question perfectly. So yeah, thank you, and yeah, thanks for the talk. It was great.
No, I say, sorry, Clara, sorry. I say we make sacrifices, but there are a few things that I refuse to sacrifice. For example, I want to be able to flush my toilet at the end of the day. So I kind of have got to the point in my life where, you know, I will sacrifice a lot of things, but that is the one thing that I'm not going to sacrifice. I will flush that damn toilet. I don't care what it takes, you know, and and so on, you know. So there are certain, you know, you don't have to end up living in a cave and eking out an existence eating moss and berries and bark and locusts and honey. You know, that's not it. We're not starting a cult, and we're not expecting people to do that. I've got staff members here that bring much more value to this institution than I do, and they are living in accommodation and, you know, having an actual life, and, you know, they're much more valuable to me. But we've just got to decide where we draw the line. I feel I can't expect my mambas to be working and living under those conditions if I don't show that I'm doing it myself. Yes, it's hard. I'm almost 50 years old now, and I kind of feel, holy shit, man, you know, I would give my left teeth for an air conditioner at some stage, or maybe a bloody TV so I can see what's happening on the Netflix, something, you know, but maybe one day. It's a bigger thing than us. We're one individual in a global community. Can we not bring some value? And, you know, and we must hide away. I'll give you another example. When we send the mambas into communities, I had a tough time to convince my staff. You don't go with. I don't want a social media. I've got a philosophy that says if you give a hungry man on the side of the road a hamburger, you feed him for a day. But if you put it on Facebook, you feed your ego for a week. You know, so I'm very firm that when the mambas do their food drop-offs and they go and help the people in the community and what have you, I don't want white people in those photographs and what have you, because it's really just an ego feeding thing. So you won't see us. We're not in the limelight. If the media wants to talk to the mambas, talk to the mambas. You know, I trust them enough to say whatever they need to say. I don't have to be there. You know, and then they say, oh, I need to talk to you. And they're going to ask me the same old boring bloody questions every single time. But it's, you know, so you need to be able to step out of the limelight and say, this is not about me. This is about them. I could die tomorrow. A piece of space debris could fall out and smack me in the head. You know, I could get abducted by aliens. I could fall down a manhole. Or, I'm not sure we're even allowed to call it a manhole anymore. The point is that this needs to stand alone. Post Craig Spencer, this needs to stand alone. I could get bitten by a black mamba snake whilst I'm sitting here. I could get eaten by a lion tomorrow. And what's going to happen next? And most of these things are personality driven, but you have to understand. So if you think of George Adamson and Daphne Sheldrake and Jane Goodall and all these great conservation names that I look up to tremendously, I fear for their institutions when they are removed from the equation. You know, will they persist? And we can only persist if we've empowered the people in our organization to take over from us. So we must set something up. Yes, absolutely. Emma, what do I want my Ben? You are too funny. Yeah, you are correct, by the way. I'll drink all of their rum and I will take over their spaceship. But if, you know, if we don't set up the people, we must come up with an idea. We must build a stage. We must write the script. And then other people must fill the cast on that script. And they can either act for an Oscar or they can be the tree in the background, you know, having very little impact. But that's their prerogative at the end of the day. The best that we can do is to build the stage and write the script. And I expect people to ad lib on the script as well. You know, and that's the platform that we've created for the Mambas. Some of them perform for an Oscar out there. The other ones are just extras. But I'm not there to tell them, hey, you useless bastard, blah, 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 blah. I hope that makes some kind of sense. That's my legacy, is that I built the stage and I wrote a loose script. That's it.
All right. Are there any other last questions?
You kind of remind me of, you're kind of like the African Steve Irwin, Greg, you know, setting up a legacy for others, because that's what he did. Like he died, but his family has carried on his legacy. You've been to the Irwin Zoo, right?
Yeah. They've actually been here every year for the past 8 years. I've seen their kids grow up. They, you know, since we started the Mambas, Steve's family has been part of the Mambas since the beginning. They are wonderful people, and they've invited the Mambas over there, and it's just been a wonderful journey with the Irwin family. But thank you, Stuart. That is a huge accolade. If somebody says something like, I could never live up to Steve Irwin's credentials, but his family is certainly a massive supporter of global conservation and women empowerment and, you know, what's right. They stand for justice in the conservation arena, you know, despite the fact that they've got animals in captivity. But, you know, that's a double-edged sword. But they've been incredibly good to the Mambas. Actually, Terry Irwin, Steve's wife, phones the Mambas personally, regularly, to give them moral support. And even during COVID-19, she had FaceTime on their cell phones with them throughout the entire process, telling them, keep it up, don't worry about it, this will pass. You know, just like that kind of pep talking all the time and so on. They are an incredible bunch. They really are.
Yeah, and they, you probably noticed that on social media, Bindi just had her first baby. I'll have to send her a little Black Mamba shirt for the little one.
And I do intend to write to them eventually when I figure out what to say to somebody who's just had a baby. But yeah, no, you're right. I just feel really sad for them that the media keeps hounding them. You know, I mean, can't you just have a bloody baby in peace? But you know, they're just so, like, everything she does, the media is onto them like a rash. It must be so annoying. The poor people, you know, and they're good people. They're down to earth people. They come here. I've got a son that I adopted from the Philippines, and him and Robert have been interacting because Robert's very big into wildlife photography, and he got Jay into wildlife photography, and now they're all wildlife photography buddies, and so on and so on. But it has to be like secret, otherwise everybody finds out about it, and it's all over the news, and they don't like it. They do not like it. They just want to be normal people, but they also understand the role that they play in the global arena. It's a burden. But yeah, what a wonderful family, hey? I mean, shit.
It's on my bucket list to meet them.
Yeah, I don't have the energy to do what they do. Mother of God. You know what's fascinating is a lot of the zoos that we partner with, including the Australia Zoo, they send their managers or keepers or handlers or whatever you want to call it down to us, and they spend time with us every year. and then they go back because that puts them in a better position to impart knowledge or information to the people that come and visit the exhibits of whatever it is that they're looking after. And the Irwins, in fact, have got hundreds of thousands of hectares of land under protection, just because there's like some rare snake or whatever that lives there. You know, and those are the unsung parts of their fandom, or whatever you want to call it. And those managers come down and they spend time with us, and that's the holiday that they get, paid for by Steve Irwin's trust. They come and they see animals in the African context. I don't know how to explain it, but I think it's a great thing. So there's the Aalborg Zoo and Kansas City Zoo, and you know, all the other zoos that we deal with. Their people come here and they interact with the wildlife on this landscape, and they go out with the mambas every day, and they spend time with them in the field, and they learn, and then they go back there. And some of them have gone back and said, "Ish, I can't do this job anymore. My animals are stuck behind a fence. I don't want to go back and face them anymore." And I say, "You will bloody well go back. Those animals need you. You know, they're stuck in captivity whether they like it or not, and they need the best care that they can possibly get. So you will not back out of this now just because you feel bad. You have a huge obligation to those animals in those zoo environments." Anyway, blah, blah, blah. Ben, when are you coming back, buddy?
Well, I just got vaccinated for COVID, so that's step one. When my work allows me to get 2 weeks away, which it could be in the next 6 months, I'll be there again. I want to tell you, if anybody that's on the call that's still left, if you've not been there, it's an absolute wonderful place to go. I've been twice for 2 weeks at a time. I could spend 2 months without even blinking an eye. And I cry when I leave. I literally do. It's like a second home. So I highly, highly recommend it. You can't, it's a great, wonderful experience, cost-wise especially. I've been in the lodges in Timavati. I've been to Kenya and Uganda. You see just as many animals. You get a totally different experience. You get to make friends. Chris, I spent a few days with him on my second trip there, and I 100% recommend it. You go, take your friends, tell your friends about it, do everything you can to support Craig and his team, because it's just a really cool thing, especially when you get out in the communities. I've been out with the kids, with the bush babies, in the schools, talking to the kids. I've been to the veterinary program that they did. I spent a day with that. It was just something I'll never forget about doing. So I highly recommend it all.
Fantastic. Thanks, Ben. That is awesome. Yeah. Now we miss you guys around the fire. Andy, I see you, Andy. Andy, is that Andy Elliott? Yeah. Also one of our highly esteemed master's students that is now working in South Africa on birds and all sorts of other exciting things and what have you. Andy, is that you? Or is that some other random Andy? But yeah, no, it's good to have you guys online. Lou as well. Miss you here in camp. Sharon.
I want to come back anytime. I just keep having babies and losing jobs. So
Damn it. You know, we have kind of come to the conclusion here that one of the most significant impacts you can make in this world for conservation, you know, for my objectives, let's say I'm selfish now, is Carol. Hey, my bush granny is online as well. Anyway, one of the most, by the way, your chicken pie was bloody marvelous. I have to do 10,000 star jumps now to work that out. But the one of the most significant impacts you can make to achieve my goals in conservation, as selfish as they might be, is to raise a child to be a responsible user of this planet.
I agree.
You know, absolutely. You know, we
yeah,
have to
you know that her nursery's got elephants in it, so
yeah,
I'm
yeah, absolutely. You know, imagine if every one of my black mambas had a kid, which I'm sure they will have at least one. And then, you know, they bring those children up to be responsible or patriotic towards the environment, or whatever the terminology might be. You're just with the proper moral compass. You've done more for conservation than all of us put together with our, you know, we're just keeping our fingers in the dikes to hold back the floodwaters. You know, it's a really big thing. There's got to be another generation that comes in with a different value system that we impart on them. So bring it on.
I'd like to ask, what's your minimum age for volunteers?
A zygote. We'll take you as a, we like the Catholic Church. If you're a zygote, we'll sign you up.
honestly, I've opened a bank account just separately, just putting a little bit in every so often. So when she's 16, me and her are coming over.
Okay, yeah, no, I'm joking about the zygote thing. I think, you know, for the sake of predator-prey relationships out here, we'd have to put an age limit on it. But I would say if you're under the supervision of your mother dearest, and if we don't have to keep you on a leash, then I don't know, what, 15? I just don't know. But I would rely on.
We can talk about it. We got time.
That's funny.
Well, Craig, I think we've taken up about 3 hours of your time now, so I'm gonna let you go so you can actually wrap up your night. But thank you so much, everyone, for coming. Thank you, Craig, so much for all of your time and expertise and everything you have shared. Thank you, everyone, for your questions. This was recorded, so if you know anyone who wasn't able to listen in on the talk, we'll be posting this online, and we'll make sure that Larry or somebody at Transfrontier is also able to post it. So feel free to share it as needed. And there will be information about volunteer opportunities or research opportunities or ways that you can connect, or if you have further questions, research questions, science questions, we'll make sure you can connect with folks as well. So thank you all again for coming, and thank you so much, Craig. And thank you, everybody,
Awesome.
for running.
Thank you, Sharon,
talking to
for
you, Craig.
setting everything up. Yeah, cheers, Stuart. Thanks very much for hooking up, guys. Really appreciate it. And keep in touch. Email me. I don't know what else there is out there. But yeah, Sharon, thanks.
Yeah, for sure. Thank you so much.
Bye, Craig. Bye, everybody.
Cheers, Chris, man. I don't know how to
Bye.
leave this thing. Yeah, there it is there. Here's the awkward part now.
Yeah,
Leaving.
just wait, watch everybody fade.
Yeah,
Bye, everybody.